All right. So this first one was by Tamara, and I'm sorry if it's a little bit soft. The picture is a little softer than the original. We had to optimize. We had a lot of large files. We had to optimize some of those, but I think it's coming through pretty well there. Okay, so Tamara, love the paint application and the mix of values, warm and cool, all throughout here. As you can see, oh, that's right, you cannot see. Sorry, let me turn on the, oh, forgot about that, sorry. Got to get my pencil so you can see what I'm talking about. I always forget that you can't see my mouse. All right, I'm actually going to use my pen. So all through here, you've got a really nice mix, like in these areas here with the yellows, you've got these cooler greens in these areas here, and then you've got the warmer shadows down in here. That's excellent. Great job with thinking through that, especially on an overcast day like that. We're going to tend to have the cooler highlights and warmer shadows. That's not a rule. There really aren't any rules in art, but that's a good guideline for helping us to figure out quickly the temperature of our shadows and our highlights. Okay, I can't use the pen because sometimes it does things and I don't know what it's doing yet. I just got a tablet so that I can try to work with the Photoshop stuff faster, and I still haven't figured out how to use it all. Little bits at a time, I guess. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. So, and then I love the separation of each area. I can really feel the separation there. So you have excellent shadow and highlight areas in it. So, and I just love, let's see, like in here, all this area right here, just a beautiful mix with these yellows that are right here. All of that is really nicely done. And then we come over here into this area. We've got all these great, cool shadows, and then we get down into some warmer shadow areas. So really a nice mix of all of that. Okay, so some of the things that stood out, I guess we should have done the circles maybe first. So these are the areas that I worked on right here. So you can see as we go along what I was concentrating on. The tree, you have all of this growth in here, all this beautiful, the flowers and everything's green and growing. And so we thought with that in here, your tree back here just felt a little bit like it, maybe giving it some life would help it as well. Maybe like some spring growth or something if this is early in the year, early in the season. And then this area right here, it kind of stops, especially right at this spot right here. It just stops. It doesn't come off the canvas. So in all these spots, each one, you take them right on off the page until we get to this area right here. And yet that area is the strongest, most saturated color. They're the biggest flowers. They're the most, they have the most detail and treatment in them. And then they stop right there. So it becomes an area of concentration. And so we kind of get locked into that area. So I thought that possibly just pulling some of that, softening out, what I did was I left some areas right here. And when I say we in this, Christy helps me with these critiques. She's my master critiquer. She comes in and critiques all of my paintings before I can give them the go-ahead to send out to a gallery. And so she's the one that I trust for that. She's been doing it a long time. So she comes and she helps me with these critiques. So two eyes are better than one, right? Two brains. All right, so with that, I left some of the strong shadow and light that you have in there and the strong saturated color, and then grayed down other parts of it and pulled it right off the painting down here, both in this area and this area in here, and broke that up just a little bit. So it felt more in line with the other rows of flowers or plants or whatever it is that you're growing there. And then with the tree, just added in a little bit, not so that it's obvious, but some subtle growth in the tree, even if it's, whether it's summertime or springtime, just enough to give it life back there. Because actually without that growth, it becomes an anomaly almost in relation to what else you have in your painting, because everything else is full of growth. And yet the tree didn't feel like it was back here. So adding some growth to it, it now blends in with the rest. It becomes a part of it, a synergistic part of the rest of the painting. And so it doesn't demand too much attention. It gives a lot of interest back there. It brings us back down to the building that you have in the background and helps us move through the painting without becoming a spot where we feel like we need to stop there. So hopefully that makes sense to you, Tamara. All right, so those, and you can see, so when you go through the replay and you're looking for your own painting, you want to see the critique on it, you can go to the circles right here, and that will give you an idea of, if you can't remember what we talked about, that's how I do that. With those circles, it lets you know where we've honed in on those spots, what areas we really focused on. All right, beautiful painting, Tamara. Excellent paint application in there, and textures. Just even in here, the way that you treated these, they're so subtle. You don't have too much detail. Everything just flows back. It works together really well. So excellent job, Tamara. All right, Susan. It just felt your painting felt very joyful and light-filled. See, nice progression, warm to cool, same thing here. So I love how you have the lavenders, like in these areas, mixed in, so it harmonizes with the yellows and the oranges. You've got these bluer, so like up in the upper area here, these are a little bit more bluer lavenders. You get down into the areas here and you have more red in the lavenders. I love that mix, that change up that you have in there between the warmer and cooler lavenders, and then how that harmonizes with the oranges that you have in the leaves. And then you get into the yellows, and then you have some greens here that work well with like the red leaves that you have in here. So beautiful mix of color harmonies in your painting. Let's see. And you do the same thing in your shadows as well. And in your green leaves, you've got the bluer green leaves, you've got the more yellow, warmer green leaves. So, and then even down here, you've got some blue shadows in there, which is great because, so the way warm and cool, light and shadow work, for the most part, we can, a good generalization for warm and cool when we're out on location is if the sun is shining, it's a very warm source of light. It's our warmest source of light. So we've got the sun shining and a direct cast shadow. Let's say you have a tree, the shadow that comes straight off of it is going to be cooler, with a warm light source, generally speaking, except when you get right to the base of the tree. Right near the tree, it's going to be a little bit warmer. And when you get right down on there, because you don't have very much of the direct light, it's more ambient light that's getting to that source, then that becomes warmer. The farther out it goes away from the tree, the cooler the light source, the cooler the shadow becomes. All of the objects around it, of course, that are in direct light are going to be nice and warm. So when we have a cooler day, the ambient light source is cooler. It's called either north light or overcast light or whatever our light source might be. When you have a cooler light source like that, then the shadows become warmer. The direct cast shadow from an ambient light source like that is a warmer shadow. So they're just opposites. It's the same thing as opposites in colors as well. You've got the blue and the orange, the purple and yellow, so forth, red and green. So the things that stood out, let me go first to the circles. So you can see the areas that we concentrated on. So right here in this circle, just breaking up some of the clumping of green that you had in there, and a little bit with these branches that were in here. And then let's see, same thing up here. There was just a little spot right here where it kind of took a dip, and since it's such a small line, this hill that's back behind us, then even a small dip like that can suddenly, we wonder, wait, what just happened there? Was that intentional, or was the artist not paying attention? Even if it's intentional, the viewer might not know that it's intentional. So if we go back here, so if you look at the original, that's what the original was right there. It dips down, and then you have this strong line up here that seems like it's going to go straight on across, but then it doesn't. Suddenly it's right here. So a simple fix, we just brought that up a little bit. And then it feels, see, you can still come down over here a little bit, and it still feels natural. It feels like a natural progression of that hill back behind us. So sometimes we'll be using a photo reference. We might have gone out and we're taking pictures of the mountains or hills or whatever it is that we're looking at, and we get a picture where, yeah, maybe there was a rock formation that's cut off right there that is like that in the photo, but we don't want to. That's why our photos are just for reference. They are not this is exactly what we have to do. We are not slaves to our photo references by any means. And most of the time when I paint, I'm using probably 70-80% imagination and maybe 5% photo reference, if that. And then a lot of it is just my experience being out on location and my imagination. So when we're looking at anything like a photo reference, if something doesn't seem right, don't paint it that way. Okay, so what I tried to do in here was just areas like this. You have all these beautiful yellow and golden leaves in here, really nice highlight like this and dark like that one right there, but they're all centered in one little clump of leaves rather than being distributed a little bit. So then what we have here is a clump here, we have a clump here, some over here, and then you see that you get this pattern of boom, boom, boom across the painting. So instead of that, and what happens with that is it creates a line. So rather than leading the viewer around the painting, it's actually just creating almost a barrier, a line across the painting. So to break that up, we just took the leaves and distributed them a little bit all around your painting. So then you have, and this is where artistic license comes in. This is where it's your own personality that'll come out. I did not, this is not a commentary on how bright to make anything, how dark to make anything, nothing like that. It was simply just taking what you have and moving it around a little bit. So then if you go and decide you want to try that on your own painting, then how many bright highlights you put around or dark accents or anything like that, that is completely up to you. I'm not making a commentary on what to do that way with this. But as you can see, just moving some things around, like up in this area here, moving things through, then it allows the viewer to move throughout the painting rather than being in just boom, this spot, then this spot, then this spot. So in a painting, for the most part, the highest contrast, if it's an obvious enough spot in a painting, that's going to demand the most attention. People are going to go to bright and dark next to each other. So when you have those bright leaves and dark accents right next to one another, and it's in a conglomeration like that, we're going to look at that. So distributing that out a bit and doing it in a way that really leads the viewer through your painting, then the viewer gets to see everything that you have in there rather than little spots. And you have so much pretty color all through this painting in here that you don't want them to just be confined to this area and then come over and get confined to that area and then maybe over to this area. See, so distributing that a little bit around will help that. Will help facilitate the path of the viewer through your painting. And then, of course, breaking it. So in the original here, you have all these little squiggly branches that almost look like tadpoles, is what I thought of. And I love little branches, little bright branches, little dark branches, because they can give so much interest to a painting. They can add a lot of movement and activity, and we can use those to really guide the viewer to places that they might not otherwise go. But when you have something, so the difference here, and I love branches too, as you can see in my work, that have movement in them and squiggles in that. But in here, you're starting off with a really thin line right here at the bottom, and then it progresses up to a thicker spot at the top. So it doesn't necessarily feel natural to the tree. And in fact, when I see all these trees that are so bright and light, to see all these little branches everywhere around in here, I don't know exactly why they're there. I start to question, where did they come from? What are they doing? Are they holding up leaves? Because in each one, they seem to be by themselves. They're not really associated anywhere. So and then we have this branch right here and this branch right here that are very strong, leading us off the right side of the page, kind of pointing us out that direction, like that. So just added a little bit of leaves around this one, and kind of diminished, didn't completely eliminate their presence, but diminished their force, the force of them directing the viewer's attention. And that way, that still allows, then with these leaves right here, it allows the viewer to continue to come back into the painting again, rather than being forcefully ejected from the painting. And then with some of the little squiggles, see, we still left a lot of those in here, the little branches, but they're more minimized and they are more deliberate in where they're at, and in the application of giving interest to the painting. Dark accent somewhere where you might have a bunch of light and you want to break up a big shape. So that's the sort of thing that I was thinking about with those. All right. So beautiful painting, really pretty. Thank you very much, Susan. All right, and then we have another Sue. So we just kind of switch things up once in a while. So you can see we're actually going this time backwards alphabetically. All right. So Sue, the red path is amazing. Christy and I both love the bold color that you have there. And when you think about it in terms of all the greens that are in here, it just works really well. I love that boldness of the path. And then there's and we love the strong light and shadow. Let's see. Oh, it's Hopper-esque. So when I did my MFA program, one of my classes was a readings class, and that's where I had to do the whole semester was just spent researching one topic. I had to write a 40-page mini book on an artist, and I chose Edward Hopper as one of my artists because I admire his work. He just has really, they're powerful, and I saw a lot of those when I was out in DC. A great place to go see several of Hopper's works, but there's something about the clarity of light in his paintings and that separation of light and shadow. It's just mesmerizing. And you've got that kind of feeling in your painting here. So I love that. Now, Hopper himself, miserable individual. I would not. His personality definitely did not. Well, sometimes it did come out in his paintings, but you can't tell his personality necessarily from his work. Work is beautiful. The person was not. He was. That's one of those sad cases. Anyway, let's see. And your figure, excellent. You've got the motion in there. I love that. So, and it feels like the figure belongs in the painting. So, excellent job with that. And so the things I focused on, this right here it's so bright and so pointed and specific and it's so close to the center, actually almost exactly in the center of the painting, that it is a bullseye. And then it makes it difficult once somebody sees that to move other places. Fortunately, the figure does offset that. And that's one of the benefits of having that figure in there. Now, the thing that stood out with the figure was this shoulder just felt a little bit awkward, almost as if it was, because what happens is when we walk forward, our arm tends to come forward, which you have that arm right here coming like be in front of the figure, so we don't see it exactly. But then the shoulder feels like it's going back this way rather than coming forward like this and rounding a little bit. So, and then in this area, this was just a big shape that you've broken up with some of the colors in here. Oh, actually, this is the shape after I broke it up. Okay, so let me show you what we've got here. So here's the original. You had 1, 2, 3 red lines coming through the yellow grasses, and they just kind of formed a pattern. So over here, I feel like your shadow in here has a meaning to it. There's something over here that's creating a shadow. The grasses all flow. Everything seems to work in harmony with all the elements work in harmony with one another. When I came over here and I saw these red lines like that, I didn't know what that meant. I wasn't sure what was going on there. And so as a viewer, if it's confusing for me and they're so strong that then it's probably going to be confusing for other viewers as well. So like when Christy comes and looks at one of my paintings and I'm very proud of some spot in there and she says, what is this? What is this? What does this even mean? If she says that, then I know that even if I love it, I've got to change it because for some reason, whatever I had up here didn't get translated down here. So, and I don't want that. We save ambiguity in a painting for emotional effect or to simplify, something like that. But it has to be, there has to be a strong purpose for it. If it's ambiguity because we didn't execute it in a way that the viewer can understand ever, then that kind of ambiguity we want to eliminate from our paintings. That's when it's really nice to have somebody else come in, look at our painting and say, oh, okay, yeah, I don't get that at all. That's very helpful. Now, sometimes they're wrong and we can ignore them, but it's a good thing when somebody does do that for us to think through, well, maybe they have a point here and ponder on it for a while and see if maybe.
Yeah, Bill has ignored me on occasion.
Yeah, or like when. Very little, very, very little. Actually, I did on one of the monthly videos, I did ignore her. She didn't think, she wanted to see more of an English, really petaled rose, and I liked the wild rose look of it. So I left it because I liked it. So, and it turned out that other people seemed to like it too. All right. So yes, once in a while, not very often though. Okay, so as you can see here at the figure, I just kind of brought it down a little bit, minimized that shoulder just a hair so that it feels more like it's rounding forward instead of sitting up. And see how far out this comes in comparison. Now if we go to the next picture, you can see there, see the little space in between right there, that space of light. That's all I did was just take it down a little bit. And then I brought some of the greens that you have over here in this other side and brought a little bit of that green into this area and just brought in some more of the yellow grasses into here to break up those spots a bit. That way it feels, it goes in harmony with all the red rocks that you have back here up in these areas, and like over in this area, but it doesn't feel like it's necessarily a 1, 2, 3 kind of pattern moving back in there. And then with this, I didn't really do much to it. I just, as you can see, I desaturated the highlight and the color so that now it doesn't stand out so much. You still, because I wasn't sure if it might be one of those landmark kind of objects that we find like at Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs. You know, there are certain things, the kissing camels. Everybody knows those are the kissing camels. You can't do a lot necessarily to change that, or you change the whole iconography of the scene. So I didn't know this might be a landmark, but if it is a landmark and you want to leave that there because people are going to recognize that, and then they say, "Ooh, I've been there. I know that spot." Well, then we can still do things to subdue those so that they don't pull the viewer right in and trap them in that spot. because really the pedestrian here is really the center of attention in this piece. And he's the one that helps lead us into the painting. And then we want to make sure that we can go in here and see all the rest of this that's so fun to look at. The rock formations and your beautiful sky up here. So we want to make sure that the viewer doesn't get trapped and isn't allowed to see everything else that's so nice in the painting. All right, excellent job. Very nice, Sue. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, Steve. Steve told us that he was doing this off of a Martin Heed painting, and he did an excellent job. I love all the textural quality in here. Do you see all the little work in there? It's not like obvious little spots everywhere where you see some kind of technique that's employed over and over again. That gets a little tedious to me. In his, there's just a whole lot of small texture, and it's the texture is broken up with warm and cool color temperatures and darker and lighter highlights and accents. So really nicely done. And then of course this, so for those who wonder about the light wing and the dark wing, that was the way he did that. And there are butterflies. This is the blue, oh crumb, what is it? Blue moth, Morpho? Can't remember now. I just drew a blank. Sorry. Anyway, it's a beautiful moth. Okay, so let's see. What did we cover? So some of the things that we noticed were these right here, Steve. You've got these. It's almost like the color was erased when you put the branches in there, all around the branches, as if you brought in the color afterwards and didn't want to get too close to the branches because you were afraid of losing those or disturbing them or messing them up or something. So those are some of the things. So right here, you can see we worked on this spot a little bit. We worked on some of these and getting the color back around the branches. And then this little spot right here, and I'll show you why. If we go back to the original, oh, I guess I should have left those little spots there. So did I go back to the original? Nope, there it is. Okay. So in the original, you can see the wing comes, this dividing line right here comes up to the top of the head. And generally speaking, even in Heed's painting, the dividing line comes down to the bottom of the body right there. So we just changed that up. And then right here, you've got this little valley, little hole like that comes down in and brings us right into this branch that loops like that, which can become it's a tangent spot of dark and light. And because it drains in like that, like a hole, then it becomes a spot where the viewer can kind of get trapped in there. So, oh, and then of course, all this right here, we changed up. So I'll point this out right here with a little circle, and this spot right here with a little circle. And we kind of changed a little bit with the wing here, just a bit. So you can see we just brought this down a little bit, nothing major. And then this, I just took some of what you had in here and added that in, just kind of filled in that hole a little bit. Not so that let me clear that up. Not so that you don't necessarily have to cover in the whole thing. It was just so strong because it came all the way down to your darker branch right there. So just kind of changed that up, brought in the color so that it's all around your branches, and just brought the wing in just a little bit, just for interest. But it's not a hard and fast something that's important. It was more just to, I don't know, give it a little bit more motion in there. That's it. So, and that was it. It's really a pretty piece. You did a great job with that painting. Okay, so there you go, Steve. Thank you very much for that. Okay, Sherry. This is really pretty. I love, as anyone can attest, that's been following me for a while, I love strong color, bright, what my professor would call juicy color. Color you can eat, and that's what I think of when I see this. So good variety of shapes and angles. So in here, you didn't just take, like this one here is not going the same direction as this one here. You know, each one has a little bit different movement to it and direction. I like that. Love how you've taken colors from one to use on another. So like the yellows on here on your highlights are the same kind of coloration that you have in your other yellow flowers. You've got reds that you've taken and moved down into this flower in here. So I like how you're mixing and matching with the colors. And that's what happens in life, because things reflect and bounce off of one another, especially luminescent colors, translucent colors like we see in flowers. Okay, so what we noticed was that mainly, did I only put the one? Because I did, okay. So we just took, you had, what happened was when we were looking at it, we thought we've got 4, it's almost like it's formed a box around the main flower right here. And so you have this one here, and then you've got your center. So as you can see in the original, then it becomes very obviously 1, 2, 3, 4, and boom, in the center right there. And these 3 are fairly close to the same size. This one over here on this side is a little bit bigger, but which also kind of makes it compete a little bit with your center of interest, which is that yellow flower in the middle. So we just took that flower and minimized it, took it down some, took it down back behind the petal of your main flower right here, and then brought in a little bit of the green that you have over here right into this spot. And I think that was, I think that's the only change. Oops, too far. I think those are the only real changes we made in there. Yeah, because that was with a piece like this, a lot of that is very, there's a lot of artistic license used in a painting like this. So it's got beautiful movement. Everything it's very colorful and fun and invigorating. So I really couldn't see anything else in it that I could say, yes, this is really distractive from the overall message in the painting, except for that filling of boxes around the 4 gold posts there or something. No, there aren't 4 gold posts. See, there you go. I don't even know how to. I played baseball when I was young, and that's about it. I don't actually know the terminology. Okay, so. And that's all I could see. Now, there is a possibility. I just noticed this. I did not see it before. You got that kind of like 3 lines right there. So possibly breaking up one of those would be good, because it does it's almost creating a movement down and out. Although it feels almost, then when I see that, it almost feels like they are propelling us, as if this flower has come off from the right side and is being propelled into the center right there. But having lines that are very strongly delineated like that, it's good to see if we can recognize them in our paintings. It's good to try to break those up. So even just taking some of the color that you have here and folding over an area in here, softening this a little bit, maybe something like that. I love this green, the mix of color that you have in that. So that would be something to ponder on and experiment with. All right. Otherwise, there's a lot of really fun. You have changed things up throughout it. So you have the 3 flowers here that have a lot of the same coloration in them, but they're each different sizes, different way of creating them, I guess, the different brush strokes and textures, and more light and dark in this one than you have up in this one. that sort of thing. So treating them differently like that helps a lot with those. And okay, so that was all that stood out to me, Sherry, on your piece. All right. Rick. Okay. So I love the, oh, beautiful painting, Sherry. Really, really pretty colors. Rick, I love the simplicity of the design in here and the fun movement in the clouds. The way these sweep up, it feels like sand dunes in the sky. They're very soft and beautiful, the way the movement goes in there. And also in the landforms, all the movement that you've created. So one of the things that I really liked is the way that you've broken things up. Like the three here, you got these. Okay, so you've got these two areas of land that are horizontal in nature, but they're different sized. They're not and that's important. You haven't created something where you've got it cut like this, and then the next one is exactly the same size, that sort of thing. It's not repetitive. And you've got different colors, different textures in there. Really well done. And then I loved how the verticality of these moves us right up here to your structure, which the structure then becomes the center of interest in the painting. But you have enough interest in the other areas to move us around to move us through and around and up into the sky. So that's good. And I like that your structure is not bullseyed right here into the middle of the painting. That would have been difficult to overcome. But having it off-centered like that really helps. Okay, so the things that stood out. Get over here to the circles. This filled right here, let's see, let me go back. So we've got, okay, so the mountain back here, you'll notice when you look at the mountains that there's quite a discrepancy when they move past the building. They change dramatically for the distance away that they are in the saturation of color and the value of them. So I changed that up. And then this little area right here that you see, right here in this spot, that was where you have this strong line coming down of the filled right here, this strong triangle of the filled, and then it suddenly stops right here at the structure and doesn't continue at all over here, so that felt like, and that's probably the way it was in the photo. Behind the barn, it might be like a field that suddenly ends right there, just like that, because fields do that. We see these square fields all the time, but bringing a little bit over it, just even a smidgen of it into this area right here, felt like it gave more continuity to that in the moving into the painting. And then you don't have quite such a strong line right here at that side of the structure. And that kind of helps then to meld the two sides of the painting together. And then with this, it almost felt as if that field was flattening out a little bit right there. So let's see, that is. So all we did was take a little bit of, because you have this wonderful texture here, you have all this amazing texture in these two spots here. I just thought maybe a little bit of texture, just even some, not obvious, not really strong like you have in the first one, but something that helps to lead the viewer back in here again like that and give some interest to that filled that's back behind it. Anything like that just is all I was thinking about with that. So it's just something to play with. You do have a variety of things. You've got the greens, and it comes down into the oranges, browns right here. But that was just something to give it a little bit more movement back in there. And that might be something to ignore too. So all of these suggestions, that's all they are. It's just ideas. So if you see that and you think, oh yeah, that resonates right away, I like that idea, go for it. Try that out, see if it works. If you think, no, I think that's just too much, then just ignore that entirely. That's the same way as I just talked about with Christy when she comes in. Okay, so you can see with the up here in this area, all I did, it was very subtle. I just took some of the blue that you had over here, added it right here, and took some of the gray that you had over here and added a little bit into that side of the mountain that you have in the distance. So you can see how bright that value is, how strong the color is over here. And then you get on this side of it and it's all very much grayed down. A lot more atmosphere affecting it. So all I did was to tie the two together a little bit more. All right. I think that is it. Those are the things that really stood out. It has a really nice, simple feeling to it with fun textures. Everything like that is working well in it. So excellent job, Rick. Okay, next we have Natalie. Okay, Natalie, love the copper pot. All the reflections and colors, all the different warm and cool that you have working in your pot. It really feels like a copper pot. And then the flowers are just beautiful. I love how you go from these detailed, we can see all the petals and light and dark in there so clearly. And then you move into softening them as you move back into the flowers back here. That's just beautifully done. Really nice. And then all of your colors harmonize really well. I love the greens that you have in here, the way that they work with all of the reddish brown tones and lavenders that you have in the pot. And then of course you mimic that with some of the colors that you have down here in the tapestry or the tablecloth. So really nice. The things that stood out were the perspective. So what I was going off of was this right here, this line. And that was what helped me to know the lines that you should have that should be there in the rest of the pot. So that's where perspective comes in. Same thing with when we get down here. If we have this much that's visible to us from the mouth of the pot, it's going to be the same thing when we come down here to the base of the pot. So if we go back, you see the difference between where I brought it out and where yours is. And that right there means that somehow the pot is, if this is the base, if this is the way the base looks naturally, then it means that the copper part of the pot right up here is actually tilting towards the viewer. It's not actually sitting flat on that base because it's not at the same angle as the base. Does that make sense? So drawing is a really important part of art. Unless, of course, we're Picasso, and then it doesn't matter. Now, Picasso did know how to draw. I'm very familiar with Picasso, but a lot of his work, he didn't care about the drawing at all, at least not to the extent of realism. So, so all I did was take this one right here and move it up. And I used this one to do it. So, and just manipulate it a little bit, and then brought this up to be in the same lines as what you have with this one right here. See, so that's basically what I'm going off of. I go off of these lines right there. Just make sure all of my lines are going the same direction, that they're eventually going to end up pointing to some perspective point, just like railroad tracks. It might be slow. I mean, the lines might be almost parallel, almost perfectly parallel, but there's going to become a point somewhere out in the distance where they're going to come together into a point. But if we have one line going this way and one line going this way, never the twain shall meet. Does that make sense? So always think railroad tracks when it comes to perspective. Okay. And then the shadows just felt when you had them, you were concerned about warm and cool in your painting. And actually, it was more because it can get really distractive when we have a lot of reflected and refracted color and light in our surroundings when we're trying to see what's going on in them. So with something as reflective and shiny as a copper pot, oftentimes it will reflect its color over onto other objects. Now, like the tablecloth or that green cloth behind, or the green cloth will be reflected into the copper pot. So it can get really confusing as to the color temperatures of shadows and of all the colors that are involved in it. So one of the things to keep in mind is that even if there is a lot of reflected light and color, a shadow, like on a tablecloth like this, that's nice and bright, a shadow still isn't going to normally, okay, no, that I can't even say that. Sometimes the shadow will be really dark, but that's if you have a light source that is just a spotlight, where if you have a really strong light source, you can have a really dark shadow, even on a light object. So like if I'm wearing a white shirt and I go into a black room, well, my shirt's going to be black. And then to the degree that I get light in there, my shirt's going to get light. But if I took a little sample of that white shirt, if I'm in let's say a room at twilight, and I have just twilight coming through, illuminating my white shirt, if I take a little square of that white shirt and I place it on a white piece of paper, it's going to look black, because it's all relative, depending on the amount of light that we have. But in this case with yours, these shadows down here felt disproportionately dark, especially when you come to this area out here, because they're so far away from the object where the light's being cast, and the light isn't really that strong in your room here. Everything is fairly moderate in the way that it's lit. It's not really strong light and dark. So all I did was lighten up your shadows in here. And then you do have these browns in here. You might be getting some of that from the colors that are in your pot, but for the most part, the shadow is going to be a reflection. And by that, I don't mean reflecting off of, I mean like a mirror reflection. It's going to be just a darker version of the colors that you have in here already, which you have a lot of lavenders in there. So all I did was take a glaze using Photoshop, just took a lavender glaze from the colors that you have in here and darkened it up a little bit. So I lightened the actual shadow that you had, but more I added the lavenders into it so that it feels like it's actually a shadow of the colors that you have in the cloth. And then on the wall, this is more of a tan color, which has as its base reds and yellows and those kinds of colors in it. So I took, still giving a little bit of the greens that you have from the cloth that's hanging right here, reflected into that. There's still a little bit of green in here, but I really warmed it up with more reds than what we had in here before. So you can see how you have a very green shadow right there. And that is possible, but with the color of the wall, it doesn't usually feel as natural. And it also doesn't differentiate it very much from the cloth itself. So even if it looks like that, if it looks like that and you feel good about it and you like it, then go ahead and stay with that. But in this case, just adding a little bit of warmth into spots in here. All I did was take some of this color, darken it up some, and do a glaze over the top of what you already had there. And boom, you have the greens that are still in there. You have some of the lavenders from the tablecloth still reflected in here, but it just feels more natural. It feels more pleasant to look at. And it gives a nice separation between the cloth here and the wall behind it. So I think, are those the main spots? Let's see. Yes. Okay. One other thing would be the table itself right here. Okay. So when you go back, you can see that the table, it feels almost like the wall is like all of this, and that might be, this wall might be a cloth that's hanging from something and it's coming over the top of the table. But since I don't know that as the viewer, then this becomes a little bit ambiguous and distractive. I don't know what's going on in there, so I'm wondering what's going on, and then I get fixated on that, wondering, well, now was that intentional? Did the artist just overlook it? I don't know for sure. So even if you might like the texture that it creates, the breakup of it, it can be a good thing to change that, just because it brings a greater clarity to it, and it actually then enhances the picture rather than becoming a distraction within the picture. Does that make sense? So now, rather than fixating on this and this line over here, which are still subtle, they're not overt, they're subtle, but now I can really focus on this, which is really the main center of interest. I also softened out some of the textures that you had on the wall there, because they just kind of felt like they might be some of that kind of textural stuff you have in a plaster wall, but they're so close to what you have right here that it becomes a distraction, and it takes away from the beauty and elegance in your pot. Okay, so that's it. I think that's all that we covered in there. So hopefully that helps, Natalie. Really, really nice piece. It's beautiful. Okay, Nancy.
Hey, Pops.
Yes.
Before you keep going, this is about a third of the way through. So if you want to give the slideshow a break.
You bet.
So we don't end up freezing.
Okay.
You take a break real fast and I'll talk to him.
I will stop the slideshow presentation. Okay, so let's see. What else do I... And stop the whiteboard. There we go. And I'll give you full reign here.
Perfect. I'm just going to take over for about 3 minutes while Dad takes a break, gives his voice a break, and while we give the slideshow a break. You noticed in the past, if we have the slideshow going for too long, sometimes it'll freeze up. So we discovered if we take a couple breaks throughout, we end up not having any freezing. It's just a better experience for you guys. So while I've got you, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk about some of the changes that we've made with the website, because you've probably noticed there's been a lot recently that we're really excited about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. While I'm on screen share mode, I can't see comments, but I'll jump back out of it at the end and answer any questions that you guys have about the site. So
I can also throw questions at you as you're doing it too, David.
Okay, sounds perfect.
Honey, you might want to turn off your mic so we don't hear your spoon clinking while David's doing his stuff.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
All right, so I've shared my screen. Hopefully everybody can see this. So here we are on the homepage. Starting right off the bat, this is a little bit different than what you guys are used to. So I want to run through this so that finding the training is really, really easy for you guys. So on the home screen, you'll notice we now have this student portal as the very first option. It's also going to be in your upper menu. So any page you're on, you can click student portal. It'll bring you to the same place. So instead of scrolling down and finding your training box and trying to go from there, simply click on the student portal for both the 6-week course and the monthly membership, because with both of those, you get those member-only benefits that we'll go over. So you're going to click here to log in, and I'll run through the process with you. Click to log in. I'll log into my account. All right, here we go. So here's the new student portal. So anytime we have any updates to the training or anything new we're adding, this is going to be where we put it. You'll notice the top two options. We have the monthly membership and we have the 6-week course. Real easy that way. All of the member benefits are going to be underneath there. So we have the upcoming live webinar. And I won't take time right now, but I will later on during today's webinar to kind of cover this, because there's some big changes with this as well. But you've got the upcoming live webinar, all the webinar replays, which today's webinar will be in here by early next week. Some fun bonus videos, and then the private Facebook group, which you guys are awesomely active in. We love that group. So if you look in here, you have the monthly membership. And the great part about this is that a lot of you have the monthly membership and you have the 6-week course. So now you don't have to jump around from one training to the other. You can access all of it through the student portal. However, if you only own the 6-week course and you're not a monthly member, or vice versa, you will click on it and it just won't give you access. It'll say that it'll just tell you don't have access. So it makes it real simple. You can come back into the student portal and go to whatever you have access to. You'll notice I'll cover real fast and we'll jump back into today's critique. All of this has been updated and changed. The 6-week course is much easier and faster to navigate. So if you finish this course a year, 2 years ago, I would recommend just jumping back into it and kind of going through a refresher, because there's a little bit more content than what you had in the past as well. And it's real easy. Just click on the week that you're wanting to train and it pulls up the videos for you. So this is, in a nutshell, the new website. So I'll go ahead and get out of this screen sharing. Okay, so that's the new website. It's faster, it's safer. Just everything about it is better, and that's from suggestions that you guys have given us. So thank you so much for that, and continue to give them. We're going to continue making this site better for you. If you have any questions, put it on the side and I'll answer that, but I'll go ahead and jump out so we can get back into the critiques.
You're going to have to turn your mic on, Bill, because not all of us can read your lips.
So you're saying you can read my lips, Christy? That's pretty good. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Okay, so said, excellent, David. Thank you. And we will get back to the slide presentation. Let's see. Hopefully it starts us off. Yep. All right, we're back at Nancy. Good deal. So Nancy sent in, she sent this in first, and then later she said, you don't really want us to send in still life. So she sent in a landscape, but we have critiqued several paintings of still lifes. And so I thought I'd go with the one that she originally wanted to have in here. It has such beautiful flowers in here. And so the color is amazing. Okay. So Nancy, beautiful variety of colors and flowers and greenery all throughout it. Just the way you, oops, I forgot to turn back on my whiteboard. Give me just a sec. I guess I have to do that each time. There we go. Okay. So you have such a rich variety of greens in here. Each one is just a little bit different. I like that a lot. And then like down here, it goes from bluish green to more yellow green. So excellent. And then same thing in your flowers, beautiful variety of colors all throughout here. And I love going from the reds and yellows to blues, purples. So you have a lot of color harmony all in your piece. And then the pot, it's just a nice, simple, it really lends itself to the vertical nature of your painting. It all speaks vertical. And so it adds an elegance to the overall painting. Very pretty. Okay, so the things that stood out are, well, the things I changed, you can see are mostly down here in the bottom area. And let me show you why. What we did. So we have this long line of red flowers that comes straight down through, and it kind of divides the painting in half almost. We've got this side and we've got this side, but they're both different from each other. And they don't necessarily, because of that line of red flowers, they don't necessarily get to mingle with one another and meet each other. So all I did was break up that line by turning this red flower into a yellow flower, taking one of the flowers you had over here, moving it over here and shrinking it down so that's smaller, taking some of the blue flowers that you have over here and bringing a little bit of that over into this area, and then bringing some of the beautiful green leaf work that you have down right here, just because if without it, there's this line like this that goes straight up the painting. And this kind of breaks up that line a bit. So let me show you what we were talking about. So right here, see, without that, it just kind of becomes a line, a very strong, because these colors are very strong right here, and the darks create a bridge, and that just kind of makes that line there. So just bringing in a little bit of foliage right here disrupts that a bit. And then of course, I just took this flower, made it orange, took this flower right here, moved it over to this spot, and then put in some of your blue flower stuff. I kind of swapped these two right here, and this one right here, just swapped them and brought a little bit more over into this spot here, just because those colors are so pretty. It was just to bring that variety into more places, and that way it gives it a little bit less predictable placement of colors as we go through it, and that helps then the viewer to move through the painting. And it'd be worth experimenting. Like you have this little spot of yellow down here, or even a spot of orange like that right there. It would be worth experimenting with even maybe a spot in somewhere like here, or a spot like right there or something. But that's something to ponder on, to think about for a while on that one. And that was it. That was, to me, it's a very elegant and beautiful painting. So quick, what did I just do? I didn't do anything. Let me go back and see. Oh, there it goes. Sorry, I don't know what that was. Okay. So that was it. And let me make sure. Yep. The rest of it, everything works really well in here, Nancy. These are a little bit different from each other. The sizes are fairly close, but because this one here has a lot more activity in it than this one, that gives them enough of that change so that they work all right in there. And then we just flow really nicely through all the different flowers in here up through the composition. And I love the texture that you have even here in the background. All of this really lends itself. It's nice and subdued, so it really gives a lot of punch to the colors in the flowers, and yet it harmonizes. The colors work well with all the other colors that you have in the composition. So beautiful, really pretty piece. All right. Thank you, Nancy. And then Myra. Okay, so Myra's painting, it looks bigger right here, but it's actually a 4-inch by 3-inch painting. So it's a small one. So we're seeing it very much blown up right now. Okay. So we both love the textural quality in here. It feels like a watercolor. And that's the nice thing. That's what I love about oil paints. I think this is an oil painting. I don't know for sure. Some of the artists in our group actually paint with acrylics or watercolors. So I don't always know. I think this is an oil painting, but it has that watercolor feeling to it. And you can do anything you want with oils. Make them look like a whole lot of other types of paint media. So it has a wonderful sense of distance. For a piece so small, you really captured that feeling of the girl and the bridge, all this area right here, being right here closer to us, and all of this moving farther off into the distance. So excellent job with that. And then very tranquil and picturesque. So the things that stood out that we worked on a bit was you have these really nice blues up here in the sky. And so just brought some of that down here into the water and subdued a little bit, just softened some, the orange that you have up here in the distance. And then right here with the, where the grass comes, it had that rounded feeling to it. So to kind of transition it into the little walkway, what is that, little wall, the decorated wall right there, I just kind of brought it around and made it a little softer transition there, and then brought in some darker color down into this area to kind of go with the grass right here. And let's see. Oh yeah, and same thing. There was something about the spot right down here that I changed up a little bit, just brought in some shadow, and because it was a kind of a bright spot right there. And then over here, where you see this circle, the tree stopped right here. It didn't continue off the painting. And it's always a good thing. We just did a blog post on that about painting to the edge. It's always good to, most of the time. Now it depends on some people have a technique where they kind of keep all of the edges softer. But in a painting where, like on this side, you did a wonderful job of taking all of the things right off the edge of the painting, as if the landscape continues on over on this area. Well, over on this side, it stopped. And what that does is it becomes a point of look at me, because it seems like a disruption that should continue, but doesn't. Then we want to look at it right there. So that's what we changed. So you can see right here, you've got the sky kind of showing back right on this area. And so you have that really bright sky, you have the dark tree, and then and you have that ending of the tree kind of abruptly. So then it really becomes, you have a lot of factors right there that are causing the viewer to come in and look in that spot. For one thing, this wall right here leads us into this area. So you have several factors contributing to us going to that spot. And you can see down here, the little bright area just kind of filled that in, because when we go from suddenly darker grass here, and then it stops right here in a corner or down on an edge of a painting, then that's the same kind of thing. It becomes a point of interest, a point where you're telling the viewer to look there. This shadow from the tree, it seemed a little strong for the softness that you have all throughout your painting. So toned that down a little bit and brought in some of the blues just to complement and give some variety to the greens that you have so much in the painting. And then also talking about a face, when you get down that small, it can get, I mean, it is definitely doable, but and so that's not why I did this. The reason I went and filled this in with hair all the way on the back, because to me, the way that the arm is facing, the way the parasol is facing, the arm coming around the front of the body, it felt as if we were looking at the backside of the girl or young lady that's there in the picture. So we just brought in hair so that it really makes it clear that this is the back of the person. You can see right here, bringing in that softening transition, brought some of the tree over here across the painting, softened down and didn't necessarily do a great job with that. Photoshop is not my forte. In fact, this edge could be softer on that part of it, because what happened here is I've got the bright there. It's almost like an outline on the outside of that. So softening that would be a good thing to do right there. And then bringing in some of these blues into this area, softening those oranges a little bit. It just made it more, it just increased the feeling of tranquility in your piece that you already have in there, and gave more interest with the colors and helps to then move the viewer back into the painting. Well, okay. And that was it. It's really, for such a small piece, you really did a fantastic job. Everything reads well, and it feels good in there. So, and the little girl just has a really old world kind of feel, a very romantic feeling to it. So, excellent job, Myra. All right. Okay, Michael. So, one of the first things we thought was, it feels cold, which is really what you're going for here. There's a lot of snow and ice, and it's a cold scene. It made me think about, I used to live in Western Montana when I was young, and we'd go in Kalispell. They would have, in Woodland Park in Kalispell, they had these lakes or ponds in the big park there. and they would freeze over. When I was a kid, it would get down to 10 and 20 below all the time. And I lived in Lakeside, but that whole area would just get so cold, and we get a lot of snow. We'd always have a foot or two of snow on the ground almost all winter long, it seemed like. So in the park, though, they would actually go out. It would get, since it was so cold, the ice would get so thick, they could go out with those Zamboni machines that they use for ice hockey, and they would flatten, make the ice all smooth and nice for ice skating. So we'd go out there and ice skate, and that's what I would think about when I was seeing all of this right here. I thought, oh, this makes me want to go ice skating again. And then we took old furniture and made our own hockey puck from electrical tape, and I don't know what else we used, and used these legs off of old chairs that we found, and we made hockey sticks and pucks, and we'd go out there and play ice hockey on the lakes. So I love that. I love winter, as long as I am dressed warmly. I don't like being too cold. Okay, so I love that. Both of us love the feeling of cold in here and snow. It's really a pretty scene. And you have beautiful texture in your rock wall here. I love the colors in your barn, in the barn facing here. The subtle transitions of blue and the warmer and cooler tones that you have in your snow, and beautiful sky back here. And then the way that your background trees really go off into the distance. That helps create a great sense of depth in your painting, Michael. Okay, so what we noticed that we thought might help was the wall was basically in a tangent, almost a little bit past it, but a basic tangent with the edge of the barn. And so it creates a really long line right there. So I just took your wall and moved it out a little bit out here. That way it's a disruption. And when you do that, it gives just more interest. And when we have really strong lines, we want to make sure that when we have a long, strong line in a painting, that we want it to be there, that it's very intentional. If we can break up lines, it helps the composition then to move the viewer in more directions rather than in one sweeping direction. And I can get a lot more going here when I'm standing up, can't I? Sorry if I get a little too flamboyant with my hands and gestures. Let's see. And then this back here, I love the structure back there. I love that building. We move back into that so well, and it's just a fun thing to move back to. And I love especially the way you have these diagonal lines moving us back to that. That is such a fun composition. All I did was tone down the color. I desaturated it a bit, taking out some of the brightness of it so that it didn't compete in brightness with this. Even if it is as bright, sometimes we get out in areas like Colorado where the air is completely clear. And I mean, you can see one mountain right here, another mountain 100 miles away, and they both look like they're right next to each other. It's crazy when you get that kind of clarity in the air. Out in the east here, where we have a lot more moisture in the air, the mountains, you can really see it's so quickly apparent the distance between mountain ranges or hills or whatever, but not in places like Colorado. So same thing can happen when we get snow on roofs like that. Sometimes the light will hit it and one will look just as close as another or just as bright as another. But as artists, it can be very helpful for the viewer, especially when we want to create the feeling of depth, which all of these diagonal lines that you have in here have done a great job of that, creating that kind of distance going back in there. Well, another way of creating distance is to minimize the brightness or darkness of a value. So that's all I did is I minimized the darkness here in the shadow and in the highlight on the roof. In fact, I grayed down and minimized the values in the whole structure just to help push that back. This area right here, it felt dark in the original comparative to what you have back here in the background. And so all I did is take some of the color that you have and the tone that you have in this background and moved it into here so that it's more inviting. It doesn't feel so dark and a feeling of don't come near me because I'm dark and foreboding and you don't want to come in here. You never know what might be lurking in there, kind of thing. This tree right here, I have circled because we were having a hard time discerning which one was in front of the other, this tree or this tree. And so just to actually give it some interest, and the two trees were kind of, these two, this pine tree and this pine tree, were almost in line with each other. So to minimize that, to help you have that sense of depth in your painting and variety, I just push this tree back some, back behind this one, and then this one comes in front of this one. So then you have that progression, that hierarchy right there. Let's see, the right here, this felt a little bit ambiguous. And the way that I loved the texture of your brush strokes coming down towards the frozen river, but they created a very strong movement down to it. And then the trees, I just brought in some of the shadow. You have this wonderful shadow over here. I love the iciness over here of the shadow going underneath, and then the dark, how it gets underneath that as you get closer in under the tree. This was missing that over here. So we just pulled some of that into it. So let's go back to the original. And so here's the original. So see, we just took some of this, added in and over here, and your brush strokes coming down, these all kind of lead down a lot. So just to help so that it didn't feel like it was all sloping towards us so much, I just disrupted that a little bit. And then this right here was such a strong shape for that spot right there, that and this little tree, the way that it was there, they almost felt like they demanded way too much attention for the other things that you have of interest in your painting. So I just eliminated the little tree and minimized that shape there so that it comes in more with the rest of the shape of your bank. And then we can flow so nicely with your river back through, in through the painting, back into this area back here, and keep wandering around in the painting. And you can see all I did was add a little bit of a darker shadow on this tree right here to help push this one back into there, and just brought that, the top of that tree down a little bit. So go back once again. Oh, too far. You can see right here, this is the same level as that tree right there. So I just minimized it, just brought it down some, and then brought this over the top of that in that spot. And then you can see also that the fence, or the rock wall, just comes out a little bit farther. And then if we look at, let's look again once more at that. You can see how dark your shadows are. This is basically as dark as any dark that you have up here in the front. And so that then we know by the hierarchy of size, and because of the wall here that moves us back, that one's farther back there. But by the values, the bright and the dark, we can't tell because the values are the same. But this is actually a lot smaller, and so it's quite a bit of a distance away from us. So then those values are going to get softer as we go farther back. And now it holds really well back in the distance, and it's a beautiful structure back there. So that's it, Michael. Excellent job. Really, it's a pretty painting. And you can see right here, this now feels, if we go back to the original, see it's a little bit darker back there, and that's nice. But it just felt like there was kind of a strong differentiation between these two areas, and that strong contrast in there kind of pulls us into that area, and it didn't feel like an area that you really wanted the viewer to be pulled into. So and this right here, I did add some of this snow over onto this side right here as a roof, because it almost felt like it's so ambiguous. And I know you have all this really pretty leaf structure and snow covering it, but this line right here almost felt like it rounded instead of coming up. So this side of the house, of the structure, comes right up here and stops. This one comes up and then it rounds around. So, and oh, I forgot to do something with that exactly. Well, okay, I brought some snow down in here so that you have the same kind of structure here, but I forgot to make this a little bit less rounding right there. But that's the idea. That's what I was working on. I just got distracted by this part and this. And so I added a little bit of that up here too. That way now it feels like it comes around right there. All right, and that was it. Excellent job. It's really pretty, Michael. Okay. So next we have Lee's, and I hope that's how you pronounce it. I'm not entirely sure. So let Christy know if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. It's a pretty name. The tree is beautiful. Good variety in the branches and leaves. It has a really soft, nice, tranquil feeling to it. It really fits the scene well. And the atmosphere is a lot of fun in here. So one of the things that stood out right away is this really strong line like that, because you have the bird cage, the bird, and this branch that all are going in a line right there. And it doesn't really let us move into the painting. It creates a line that stops the viewer right here. It's almost like a wall saying, don't go past this point. Sorry, there's a wall here, nothing to see. And then your atmosphere, you have this really strong atmosphere all back here. It comes all the way up to this point where even the bird cage is all blued out with atmosphere, and then suddenly it's not. It stops, the atmosphere is gone. The tree is basically not, it has a little bit of atmospheric quality to it, but these grasses right here don't. So to make a little bit more subtle change, I just took your grasses and stepped them back atmospherically so that it's not an abrupt change from the atmosphere to the not having atmosphere. And then the bird cage, and this is one of those where it is a nice sentiment. The idea that the bird is now free, as if it's kind of like when I was in school, one of my professors had us do, each semester, we had to do a self-portrait project. It was a big project. And these self-portraits were often, he said, a representation of our hopes and dreams and ideas. So there was one that I did, and this is all done with graphite. These were pencil drawings that we were doing. And they took usually several hundred hours to complete. They're really in-depth, detailed work. So what I did is I had my wife photograph me, had Christy photograph me on a bicycle. And then I had a paintbrush in my hands, and I was going like this, pushing forward. And and then I did, in the self-portrait, I put an elephant, and I'm on the elephant with my hand forward in this paintbrush. And there are tubes of paint that become the trees that are all around me. And I'm going through this forest of paint. And so my professor said that was my idea of taking on the art world. I was going to go out there and conquer the art world. So that was my self-portrait. Well, so I thought of, with this, this idea with the bird cage, it might be a story that you're trying to tell, of either yourself or someone that that is suddenly set free, and you feel that freedom that comes from that. So I was very hesitant to get rid of the bird cage because of that, because that idea that might be there. But it felt as if with the painting by itself, as it is, that if we just move the bird up a little bit, as if it's coming to a light on a branch or something, then the bird fits into the scene well. The grasses now move us back into that atmosphere that's there. Everything takes on a symbiotic kind of harmony to it, so that then all the relationships are in mesh with each other, and the viewer doesn't have to understand some backstory that they might not catch, if they're just looking at the at the scene. So if let's say that you wanted to keep a bird cage in there, then maybe taking a bird cage and tilting it on its side and having the door open, that sort of thing, as if the bird is free and, but the cage is so, it's off here in the distance a ways. So we barely notice that it's there. But then once the viewer does see it, it's an aha moment. Oh, I see. Then it becomes something that doesn't distract from the painting, but it can still be part of the story. Does that make sense? So those are some of the things to think about when we're trying to do some kind of that type of cathartic or emotional story in a painting, is to make sure that the things aren't distracting from the overall feeling in the painting, that they lend themselves to interest in the painting, to those aha moments as we go through it, but they aren't right in our face and then we're done, because we can't go any farther than that, because you just have a lot of really pretty stuff in the painting that I would not want to see the viewer prevented from enjoying as we go back. One of the other things, just a minor thing, was in this area right here, the branches kind of stop, and then we have this really bright stuff. So it's with that, as you notice right here, this then becomes an area where the painting is almost divided in half. You've got this side, and then you have this side, and they're not coming together well. So all I did was take that and combine the two, just bringing in some branches so that you can't really tell where the division starts. It's probably a bank of trees that goes all the way back along that area off in the distance. And that way it's there, it's very pretty, but it doesn't distract the viewer. We don't start to get distracted by all that contrast that's back here. Okay, and that was it. So you can see Lise, with just some simple things, you have a really successful painting. So beautiful. All right, Linda. Christy and I have been, this is Bear Lake, she said, and we've been to this area. Christy's family used to have family reunions there. It's a beautiful place to be. We didn't exactly see this spot right here, but we have been to Bear Lake. Okay, so dynamic color and composition in your painting, really nice. I love the how we feel like we're up on a promontory or some high spot, and we get to look down over all this this dramatic, magnificent landscape, and then the variety of shapes and the variety of shapes that you have all through here. It's really nicely painted. I love, like, your rocks. You have the smaller ones here. You got the big ones. You have a variety of shapes within your rocks. You disrupt those, like with the green right here, with the trees that come over it. I like that. That is nice. Now, one of the things that I did not, I just realized that looking at it now, and that's the way it is. Christy, sometimes she'll come in and she'll have told me things I need to change, and I'll get it all done and I'll think, I'm finished. She comes back in and she says, well, what about this? I'll say, well, that's been there the whole time. I didn't notice it before. So then I have to fix it. Well, that's the way it is with anyone that's critiquing a painting. I just noticed that you have this really bright highlight that comes all the way down on both sides. So this area down here on that, it feels unfinished. All of this right here through that tree feels very natural and just fits so well with it. And then we get to that bottom part, and it suddenly, it stands out almost as if it's just not finished on one side or another. So that might be something to work on, because you have really nice, soft transitional tones between the trunk of the tree and the branches everywhere. And then we come to that. And actually, when I think about that, this part of the tree feels like it's almost behind this pine tree, and yet this is coming in front of the pine trees. That might be something to think about. Maybe it might be more successful to bring like this smaller one in front of this tree, so that we know that they're intermingling with one another, and push the bigger one back behind this pine tree right here, just so that because then it will actually increase the feeling of the size and height of this main aspen tree right there, because we'll feel like it's down even farther back behind there. So it's even taller than what we see right here in front of us. So that's something to think about, Linda. And I did not work on that in here. So I'll show you the things that we did focus on. Mainly the values of this area back here in the back were about the same as the values of light and dark that you have in your rocks here in the front. And so that then becomes, so if you notice, let's see, and does it fill? Changed. Barely. I don't, well, oh, there we go. Oh, I was on the after. It's like, well, that doesn't seem like it changed at all. Okay. Whew. That was close. I thought I didn't really do anything to it. Okay. So there you go. See, like this right here, all of this in here, even the areas that you have up here. In fact, oops, sorry. That's not, oh, that's going to mess it up. Yikes. I didn't mean to do that. There we go. This is not showing all of your sky up there. It's not showing the whole painting. Hopefully all of you see the whole painting. I do not. So that's what I was trying to do there, was get it so I could see everything. But I guess I can.
Yeah, they can see the full painting. You just can't because you have a tool that covers it.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So even the little ridge stuff that you have up here, all of that is very strong, dark and light, very strong contrast. So, and then your lake down here, it was actually just this mainly, just that spot right there. I know it's probably showing up as in the photo reference or when you were there looking at it, but taking that out doesn't diminish at all the grandeur of your composition, but it becomes less of a distraction down there. And then it feels like we can actually go from that and go right back on up into here into the mountains. But you notice how they, oops, wrong thing. Notice that the difference between just toning that down. So even just taking a glaze of like walnut oil and a little bit of white and some pigment, some color that you want to have to glaze over that. Very little white, very little paint in the walnut oil, and just do it by degrees until you get to where you like the values that are in there. That'll help then to create a greater sense of distance. Now, sometimes when I was talking about the Colorado atmosphere, sometimes there really is not a huge difference in the contrasts and the values of light and dark. We can't see it very well when we're looking at it. But in our paintings, we want to compensate for that as artists, because then the viewer isn't going to recognize that there's as much distance as there really is in there. So keeping these light and dark much stronger in contrast than what you have back here is going to help the viewer to feel that sense of distance in there, create more.
There's a question concerning this painting. Tara says, is there duplicity of light here? On the trunk of the aspen is on the left, the green trees on the right.
Oh, I see. Right here. You might want to turn off your mic, Christy, because I can hear myself. Yeah, I see that. So we've got the dark on this side of it. On this side is the dark here, and on this side is the shadow there. I can see that. I did not notice that before. And that might just be one of those that's kind of an oversight, because as far as the foliage goes, it's really tough to tell our light source, where the light is coming from. So we can see over here, just on the mountain, it looks like the light is hitting right there. But then on here, we've got this really dark spot right here. So it's almost as if the light is coming from back behind this direction, and it might be backlit. So like if we were on the other side of this ridge, it would be lit on that side. And that's why we have the shadow side on over here. So if our light source is coming from that direction and coming down and hitting on a spot like that, then the light we should have a little bit more light. And you can see that right there with the highlight that she has on it. So it's very possible that if the light source is, let's say, right over in this direction, maybe farther back from what I'm showing it, but if it tends to be right there, then it might shine out in two different directions like that. But that does make it a little bit, then in a piece like this, that can get confusing for a viewer. But obviously for me, I didn't notice it when I was going through this. So I don't know if it's a hard and fast thing to worry about in this piece, but it's definitely something to think about. That was an excellent observation. Thank you for pointing that out. Those are things that it's always good for us to think about. So same thing, we've got this backlit right here, it looks like, but then we come down to the rock and we've got this shadow right there. And that's the thing with critiquing as well. We don't always see everything, and that might be, maybe there's such a sharp cut on that rock right there that it does create that kind of a shadow in that spot. Whereas right here, we've got the highlight on there. And obviously in all of these, we've got the shadow back behind. We've got the highlight on this part of it. So overall, that's all working really well right there. And I like this bit of contrast there. So I wouldn't want to see that necessarily disappear. And you can see she's got the highlight on the outside of that rock right there. I'm trying to look through the rest. So it could be that it's more of a centralized area of light that's creating that, just like that, coming in directions like that as we go. Does that make sense? So that's just something to think about in painting. And it often is nice to take a light source and have it way off here in the distance, because then if it's coming from one direction like that, it does simplify our figuring things out with our light source in our painting. But it's often fun to have a light source that's off in the distance that's coming in and kind of backlighting everything as well. Although this feels like it's probably more of an overcast day rather than a really strong light source, because we have all the foliage is much more evenly diffused as far as its lighting conditions go. Yeah.
Dominique asks, is there confusion between local color and shadow color?
Local color and shadow color. Let's see. I can see, okay, so we have some really strong, darker colors on the outside of the foliage, like the leaves or the needles or whatever in here. And then now some of this down here that gets bright it looks to me is because there are some trees back here that are more brightly lit that are coming through. When we come down to this area, we do have this dark outline around the bright foliage that's in here. Like right there, there's a dark spot up on top of the tree. And so when we talk about local color usually refers to the actual color of the object. So if you took it and there is no neutral place you can take a color to look at it. There's always something that it's relative to. But let's say we know that if it's a red apple, it's red. If it's a green apple, it's green. That's considered the local color. Now, as far as all of the variations of color within that, that's when we get into shadow colors, halftone colors, light colors. All of those are influenced by objects around them that might be reflecting into them. So we have a red apple. We might have an orange tablecloth that it's sitting on. That orange tablecloth, the light bouncing on it is going to bounce up, and that orange color is going to reflect into the apple. We might have a blue vase over here. Some of that blue is going to reflect in over here. And then it'll depend on if we're on the shadow side or the light side. So there are a lot of things that come into influencing our colors. That's why in a landscape, we can get such a variety of colors in everything around, because everything is influencing the other things around it. So the sky color is going to influence the colors in the trees. We might, and then the direction of the leaves. So for instance, with what I think are aspen trees right here, and very pretty ones. When we get to the leaves in aspen trees, the wonderful things about aspen leaves is that they move all the time. They're called quaking aspens because a little breeze comes along and they're just moving all over. They've got this wonderful shape that it's just great what they do. So when you get that movement, you might have one leaf that turns completely towards the light, and all we see is just a highlight of that light, very bright. And then we have a darker green or yellow or orange that on the back side of that's not getting any light. Maybe just a little bit of light might filter through there somehow. But the leaves are thick enough that generally that's not happening. And then we might have a leaf that's turned a little bit towards us, so it's catching some of that light. So it's nice and bright still. And because the light's reflecting on there, we really don't see any color. We don't see the local color of that. We just see the color of the light that's shining on there. Then it might turn away in such a way that we see the local color very strongly, but it's a little bit in shadow, and so it changes that color a bit. That's why.
Sorry, I thought you were done. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Dominique said she was thinking about the middle upper mountain compared to the shadowed foreground rock.
The middle upper mountain. And I don't know. I'd have to have more information. I don't even know it. I'm not catching that at all. Okay, so that's the problem with having back and forth. It takes so long before you hear me talking that we don't always. Oops, darn! I keep pushing my scroll button. Sorry. Okay, so because I keep wanting to scroll up and see more of the picture. What does that do? No, I don't think that does anything. There we go. It actually changes it a little bit. Okay, so let's see. She's talking about the local color between the. So is she saying that it's possible that the color? Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know exactly what she's wanting from that when she's talking about local color versus shadow color. I'd have to have a little bit more information. Sorry.
That's all right. Maybe if we want to continue this, we can do it after you're done with everything and come back to this if people have questions.
Okay, sounds good. So the main thing, I think, the main takeaway from this piece right here, and Linda, with all this discussion on it, don't get overly anxious about it. That's a really pretty painting. So there's just minor tweaks will make a huge difference in it. So just going from thinking about in terms of distance is one of the big ones here. Just taking the values from there and these, because your colors there's such a similarity in colors and color relationships in those, that if you just go from the darker to a little bit lighter and bluing it out a bit as it goes into the distance, that will help then to help create more depth in the painting. So that, and then taking out the little area of the mountain right there, are the main things that stood out to me. Okay, well, great job. There's a lot of, sorry, I probably talked way too much on that. And that's it. Beautiful piece. Thank you very much, Linda. Okay, Leanna, this was from one of our paint-togethers that we had, was that early this year or early last year? Can't remember. It might have been January 2016. I know it was in January. Can't remember which one, though. So for any of you who look back at the old replays, paint-together replays, this is one of the pieces that we worked on. All right, so I love she took a lot of artistic license with it and had fun with the colors in here. So that is great. I love the mix of red and greens in the leaves. Like in this area right here, you've got these greens, and then you have reds. It's always a fun thing to mix color harmonies like that, and they work really well together. And then, of course, you've got some yellows with your lavenders. That's just fun stuff. And then fun texture and light. All these, just, you have a lot of texture all through here and in this area in here. And then you change that up as we go in from one area to another. So that's very pretty. And all of this helps to lead the viewer back into the painting. Okay, so some of the things that stood out to me, Leanna. So it looks like a lot of circles on there, but they're kind of all along the same lines as one another. A lot of strong, let me go back and show you. So what I did was, just to let you know, is the bank here felt as if it was missing something. There's a lot of that dusty light filter that was going on in it that obscured most of it. And then these were, you had this threesome coming off like that of branches that just felt a little bit unnatural in the way that the hard angular shape of them. So I just took the two of them and made them lighter lavender so that they were back on the bank back here rather than attached to this tree right here. And that helps to push us back into the painting more and makes an easy fix for that spot. And then toned down a little bit, brought in a little bit of gray into some of the, like what you have up in here, just to soften that a little bit. These two, you have two strong branches in here earlier. And then you had 1, 2, 3, 4 trunks that were almost evenly spaced. So I broke those up. And let's go back to the original. So you can see this branch right here is really strong. And so this trunk that you have is in the photograph is actually a power pole that's out there. You can see the power lines coming off of it. But turning it into a tree, that's what I did as well. I think is a fun thing to do. And then because it's the only one, it's not like we're in some kind of a setting where it really, sometimes we have a setting like on an old country road or something where those power lines and poles can help create some kind of an interest in the painting and lead the viewer into a certain area that we want them to go into. But in this case, that one power pole is hard to distinguish. It looked more like a tree than anything else. So I thought the best solution was to turn it into a tree. And Leanna did that here. But then this branch right here, it's so strong. And when we get back here onto this bank, we've got all of this dust that the light is coming through. It's filtering into that dust, and it creates this really hazy, bright spot in there. And yet this is it's stronger as a trunk than almost any of the others that are in here. And so it actually then that pulls it forward towards the viewer rather than pushing it back farther away in distance from these other trunks that are here. And then you can see this almost even spacing of trunks right here also becomes a rhythmic pattern that's nice to break up. So I just eliminated this trunk right here, just pushed it back into the trees so that it's barely noticeable. Brought in, softened down this here, softened this down with some of the colors that you have in this tree right here so that it pushes it back into the distance more. And then brought in some of the color that you have here that's so nice down into this area more. I like a lot the reds that you have in here and just pulled a little bit of that red over into this area, into these purples to help, because there's so much purple here. It's all about the same value, the same treatment from top to bottom. So I just brought in some of the reds that you have over here into this area to help kind of give some variety in that spot. And then these two right here are very strong, and they just lead very forcefully into that direction. And then they just kind of stop almost right here. They blend into this one. You have this that kind of goes up like this, but then they also stop right here. So to create a little bit more of us, and then this one right here it also just ends right there, as you can see. So I just created a little bit more subtle transitions of with all of those branches. I pretty well combined the two and made one here so that that kind of feels like it's going up into there, but made this a little bit more subdued as it goes back in, like in here. And then this, as it comes out, gets a little bit softened as well with leaves and things coming over the top of it. And then this is softened out that branch, pulled that back behind a little bit more, really softened this down and brought it to the top of the bank so that it really pushes it back even more and creates a greater sense of distance in your painting. And then brought in a lot of the color that you have in here and minimized this bright area so that it doesn't dominate so much. That way, it still pulls the viewer back in there, that nice contrast, but it doesn't obliterate the bank that you have back here. And then you can see that the trees here that are back there as well. So here's the original. I've softened out. So we have these right here that are very strong shapes all by themselves. And they're almost like soldiers in a row right there. So I just kind of broke some of that up a little bit, especially down in this area. Because when we get down to here, we're getting very close to this center of interest, which is this area of bright light. That's where the viewer is first going to kind of be pulled to. So breaking this up a little bit becomes less of a distraction, and it helps those two to feel more integrated with one another. And then you can see there's a little bit more of the reds from here over into this area. And it might be a nice thing to just, because over in here, you have some really strong areas of contrast, tonal changes, more so than over in this bank. So this bank becomes a very strong shape that's basically almost the same value and treatment of the textures the same, the shapes are the same, the values are this, you have a variety of values in there with the little light and dark dots all in it, but it's the same treatment of values and dots, same size of dots, the same value shifts all through there from the top of the page all the way to the bottom of the page, or not top of the page, but top of the hill all the way to the bottom of the hill. It's the same. So changing up that as you go along, it would give more visual interest in there. So let's say maybe brightening up this area on the top, darkening this area down here because it's getting less light to it, because it's rolling away from this brighter area of light over here, or whatever source of light we might have. You can make that up. Even if it looks like this in a photo reference, we can change that because we're artists. And so making an area that's a little darker, like let's just putting a darker glaze over the top of that, just to tone it down some, and then a lighter glaze on top of up here, just so we have that change. Gives a lot more visual interest to it. So a lot of it was just softening. See right here, these now aren't coming out so strongly with that strong line right there that they suddenly just take off of. And it gives it a little more natural transition from one area to another area. I brought in a few more leaves into some of these areas right here. Same thing up in the top, so that it has the two, because then that way you don't have an abrupt end from this one and this one where they're kind of separated right here. When we pull one over another like that, it helps to integrate the two areas, and it also helps to create one area that's going back farther from another area. All right, and that was it. I think those are the main areas that we focused on. All right, great job, Leanna. That's a pretty piece.
Want to take our last break before you finish these out?
Sure.
All right.
Let me get off of here. And how do I, let's see. Now I have to remember again how I do that. How do I get, stop the slide presentation. Okay, it takes me a minute. Sorry, I get into one line of thought.
Perfect. So we've only got a few paintings left. So before we finish out and to give Dad a little bit of a break, I'm going to show you the last thing on the website that we're going to cover today. I told you I was going to, oh, I haven't screen shared. You can't actually see me.
I'll be right back then.
Here we go. Okay, so I told you I was going to come back to this. The upcoming live webinar. So this is again in the student portal, available in the menu and on the homepage. So come to the student portal, log in.
You'll want to full screen that, David.
Oh, thank you. Student portal, log in. And then just click on upcoming live webinar. This is going to be updated every month to make it real easy. So you just have one place you need to come to. There's a little fun how-to video on here from Mom as well, if you need a little bit more help figuring out how to use it. But when you're on here, it's going to say the upcoming webinar, which obviously that is today's. So this is going to change out soon for our January Paint Together. And then if you come down, you can submit your painting for the upcoming webinar. So no matter what month it is, you can just come right in here and submit that, and I'll show you how to do that. So if I'm going to submit for mine, and my title is going to be something really awesome, I'll go select the file. I'll pick Dad's nativity picture. Once that blue goes back down, that means that it's uploaded. I understand that I'm giving permission for it to be used publicly because obviously we are using it in these webinars. And then you submit. So it takes usually less than 5 seconds to process. And then it's done. Now it's important to know that as always, we only have room for 25, because you can see even at 25, these webinars go between 2 and 3 hours. So we can't really do more than 25 images. So like it says in here, if you're not in the first 25, it'll simply roll you into the next all-out webinar. So your painting is still going to be used. It just might not be used in the next one. Now our Paint Together is already available. We're using Spike's picture that he sent us of Spanish Peaks over in Colorado. So if you want to get started on that, you can paint your painting from this image for January's webinar together, and you can submit that right away. We have a submission right there as well. So if there's any questions on that, again, go ahead and put it in the comments and I'll help out. If not, we'll go ahead and jump back in.
All right.
Can I say one thing about that? Just to clear the confusion, when you submit the painting, you are not registered for the webinar.
Correct.
That's a good thing to point out.
There is, if you look on, let me share this again. If you look on the page for the upcoming webinar, there's a link right here to be able to register for the next webinar. So this will be changed out again for January soon, since today is December 16th.
All right. Thank you very much. I love how it's getting much more easy for everybody to do all of that. Yeah, when it comes to a lot of this stuff now, I really don't know much. If somebody called me to say, hey, I need you to take care of this, I wouldn't know how to do very much of that. David has really helped me to get separated from all the technical side of it. He's just done an amazing job with all of that. So he's given me the time to focus on all the rest that we're doing here with the videos and all that. So if you see back here, I've got this cloud painting on my easel right now. That's what I'm trying to, someone wrote in and said they were having trouble with clouds and wondered if I could do something with clouds for the monthly membership. So that's what I'm hoping to finish and have done. We're going to be working around the clock to do it, but we have another video that we're also working on that's a long one, but this is a 16 by 20 of clouds, and that's what I'm trying to finish and have ready for the monthly video by the end of this month. So if everything goes well, I'll be able to do that and have that out for you. But that's David has made that possible, and Christy. Okay, so slide presentation again, and yeah, my voice, it just doesn't hold out as long as it used to anymore. So that's why we had to limit these. I just can't, my voice can't do it that long. Christy Christy's actually a speech therapist and knows all this stuff, but I haven't learned very well how to speak without hurting my throat. Okay, so.
Hey, before you jump into it, Myra in the comments asked how you feel about submitting to a show a painting from the reference photo for the Paint Together.
Wait, say that again?
Myra asked how you feel about submitting a painting to a show that they did from the reference photo for the Paint Together.
Oh, it doesn't bother me at all. It's your painting. And that's why with anyone who submits reference images for the community, that's why we wanted to make sure that they knew that it was open to for the community to use at will. So yeah, that's not a problem. Now, if you do a painting from one of my paintings, as an artist from your standpoint, I would be leery of doing that. It would be like taking, I mean, I'm not putting myself in the same league as the old masters, but let's say we go to a museum and we do a copy of one of the painters there, like Monet or somebody, and then we submit that to a show, then it diminishes what we accomplished because we're starting with someone else's work. So just for your own sake, not for mine, because it's not going to really affect me. But so like back in the early 90s, I was in Taos, New Mexico at the Quast Gallery. It was a really nice gallery. But I went in there and I saw one of their artists and I saw a painting that was in there. It was a nice painting, but it was also a copy of a Clyde Aspavig painting that I had just seen a couple of months before that in one of the magazines. And so I pointed out to him, I said, if I see this, somebody else is going to see this too. And I told him, that's a Clyde Aspavig piece. That is not that artist's work. But the artist didn't give credit to Clyde Aspavig at all. And that doesn't come across well with other artists. So it's not going to affect me, but it might affect any artist who does that if they do it off of my work. So that's the only reason why I would suggest you not use a painting that you do from one of my paintings. But if you do it from one of my reference photos, feel free, or from anyone else's reference photo. That's not gonna. I don't see any problem with that because you're really creating your own rendition of it.
And on that subject, as far as the reference photos, if you notice on the upcoming webinar, there is a place to be able to submit reference photos, and we love when you guys do that. We actually have quite a few sitting waiting, and I'm going to make a gallery of reference photos. So you'll notice you do have to click saying can be used publicly. So I'm going to make a gallery of reference photos just for members like you to be able to get on and have a massive amount of photos to be able to choose from for your paintings.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's fun. Now, for some reason, we just jumped from Leanna to, oh, wait, oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Never mind. Now I remember. Okay, so you'll notice this one is out of alphabetical order. The reason for that is because, oh, wait. No, we still should have K. It should have been, did we miss someone? No. Should have been Katie next. Let me make sure that we actually have Katie in. Oh, okay. So for some reason, they're just a little bit out of J. Oh, they're out of order on my thing here. Okay, now I've got it figured out. Sorry for the confusion. I was the one confused. For some reason, we have Katie in here earlier. Okay, got it now. Good to go. Okay, so this is Lee's painting, and this is really nicely done. So many things in it that are excellent. We really liked Lee. Oh, you know what? I don't have my white. I need my pencil. Sorry, let me grab that. Okay, now I've got my pencil again. Okay, so this right here, it should distract us because it's right there and it's got some beautiful light and dark, but I don't feel like it distracts from the painting. You've got a nice transitional foliage around it. You have this area of foliage right here on the top of it. The values are subdued enough that it really just leads us into the painting, and it has a lot of interest to it. It's just a fun structure to have right there. So I like that a lot. And then nice color, everything, all the colors all throughout here, they really harmonize. They work well together. It's a nice color harmony all through your painting. So let's see. And the receding hills, I really like the color and the way that you treated the top of it right here, that hill. It's beautiful. It just recedes back in there. It holds itself well as the hills or mountains off in the distance, and yet it's not an obvious thing. You really got that atmosphere, the clouds and everything working well in there. Okay, so let's see. So the things that stood out are the path. It almost felt as if it was rounded like this. See? Rounded rather than flat. And part of the reason for that is because of this strong line that we have here. You'll see this bright color right there. You have some bits of highlight on there, and then that really strong hard edge. And then over on this side, it goes from this lighter area to a dark that looks, rather than like a shadow cast on that, it looks like a ditch on the side. So it makes it feel like it's rounding in the middle and then slopes down on either side rather than being flat. So we address that. The right here is ambiguous for me. I did not know. I like all the texture. I like the feeling of wood siding and the colors and everything else in there, but I did not know what was happening here. If this was the side of this barn right here, if it's attached to this, because it comes out in a way that I'm pretty sure it was meant to be the side of this barn right here. But because this door ends right here, that confused me. And so I didn't know what was happening there. So let's see. And that's mainly it. So, and you go from, this is kind of wide right here to thin right here. You do have some path right here that seems to be a part of it, but I decided to see what you would think of this. So I just brought in a little bit of the color that you have back here into some spots in here, just to kind of integrate this area of the path with this area of the path a little bit. I took this and took the bright part of it and added it to this barn or this structure instead, kind of like the way you have the light hitting on the side of this structure over here, and darkened the side of this building, gave it the same. You have this molding over here. I gave the same kind of molding over onto this side of the barn, and then put some molding around that doorway. That way then, for me, I know that this building and this right here are two separate objects, two separate shapes, and that belong, that there's some distance between them. And made a little bit of more clarity on the side of the roof right there. And then this area of the roof in the original looks like there's nothing there, as if the siding, the roof, the metal on the roof had been blown off or something, or deteriorated and was gone, because we can see the mountains, the hills back there through it. We can see everything through it, as if everything is gone, and all you have is the lattice structure, the wood structure to hold up that metal roofing. So I added some substance to it, and I don't know exactly how that would go, but a little bit darker on the inside and a little bit more of that red that you have here on the outside of it, just for a softer transition from the inside to the outside of that. Adding that. Let's see, the trees, the way that I've done your trees is not the way I would suggest that you paint them. It would have taken me just too many hours of using Photoshop to make them look nice the way that you have everything else in your painting look. So I couldn't do them justice. but these are just, it's as if they're in some kind of atmosphere that ends right here. And I realize that there are some plants like the smoke bushes and stuff that have that kind of smoky feeling to them. But it seemed like it affected everything all the way around here and then just stopped and didn't affect anything else around it. And I didn't get the feeling that it was that plant. I get the feeling like it was in some kind of a fog or a haze. So just coming in with a little bit stronger color into those to give them definite substance, just like what we did with the roof over here. Let's see. And then with the, if I could blow this up bigger, you'd be able to see it better. But I can't, that is one limitation of this. I can't do that. But I just took the colors that you have all around in here and in some of the plants over here and broke up the line of this so that maybe you have a clump of grass that's coming out a little bit farther away, and then you have a bush that goes back and there's some shadow behind it. You know, you have that back and forth all along the path of grasses and dirt going back, you know, that sort of thing. So it just breaks up that hard line on that path, and then softened the shadows that you had on this side along here. So then it helps to flatten that out a little bit. Now, some of the other things that might help is like this shadow right here that I didn't do anything with, because it's rounding like that, that helps to cause that feeling of a hill in the path rather than, and really a path is usually more of a depression rather than a hill. So to create the feeling of a depression more, or a flat path, it might be good to take something like that shadow and do this with it more than this with it. Does that make sense? Just even little subtle tweaks like that can make a big difference on how that feels. Let's see. I took some of the plants that you had, like these right here, pulled them over the top of that path as well, so that these then don't feel like they suddenly just stop. And there's a line right there. So you can see right there, most of them follow kind of this line like that. And then you have the shadows, and then you have the path. So I did the same thing with the way that we broke up the line right here on that path. I was doing the same thing a little bit in here as well. You have some of that with like a plant right there coming across, but varying it up more with bigger clumps and smaller clumps and that sort of thing can also help break that up. And that, I think that was it. Let me see here. Those are the main things. Yep, that's all that was it. So those are very minor things, really, Lee, for you to work on with your skills and prolific nature. That probably won't take you very long at all. And please don't look at this on how to do that, because that's not the intent of it. All right, so excellent. Really, a really fun painting. I like it. Okay, so next we have Katie. Okay, now Katie, we found out just shortly before the webinar was going to start, so we couldn't switch it out. I couldn't do anything with it. She said that she was looking through in one of our blogs and saw a thing on how to take pictures of your artwork, and so sent us a photo of this after that Christy said is much different from what I see here, but I haven't seen the new photo, and we did not have time with everything this morning to do anything with it. Sorry about that, Katie. So we're just going to go off of what we have here, but I don't know how good of a representation this is of her actual painting. Okay, so maybe later we can get the actual painting in like the showcase gallery or something like that, because this is a fun piece. The beautiful color shifts, these really subtle color shifts all the way through here. If we look, we've got these lavenders in here. Then we go to more golden colors, and then the greens. Just a whole lot of really nice shifts from one color temperature, one color family to another. And then same thing back here. We've got these little subtle, more bluish tones, greenish tones, oranges, lavenders, bluish lavenders, reddish lavenders, all the way through here. Really pretty color changes all throughout it. and it's just dynamic. And then of course the texture is just a lot of fun. I love good paint texture. And then excellent variety of color shapes. They're all treated differently. You don't have just one flower type and then you put it everywhere, boom, 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 all the way through. So nice variety all through there with your flower shapes, the leaf shapes, the textures that you have. So the things that we focused on, we're just bringing up. So I'll show you where the circles are right here. It's really simple. There was a dark spot right here, and this was really dark compared to anything else in there. They were very dark, so they, in all that field of more light middle values, they really stood out. So I subdued those, took some of your flowers and just brought them up over the top of this path or whatever it is, that break between them. Just brought them up over the top of that so that it helps then to integrate the different areas together while still maintaining that separation that you have between this area and this area. So we'll go back here and you can see the changes, what that looks like. And it's not like we took a line across here to make sure that you have them, all the way through. There's breaks in here, breaks after this, so that you have a variety through there. Not everywhere, just some in spots. And so there's the original, and there's the change with that. And then you can see with those dark spots, this is like almost a bullseye here. This is basically in the center of the painting, and then one a little bit off to the side of it. And they're so dark that they don't really match, I didn't feel, anything else that you have in here in this area. So those are very simple changes. The background back here, it's just lovely. It's beautiful. All the changes and color temperature shifts that you have back in there, it's really pretty. So I couldn't see anything else that I knew to do to this to change it anymore. So excellent job, Katie. And I look forward to seeing your new one. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do that this morning. Okay. Then we have Joan. All right. Wonderful feeling of light and sunshine in here. Great light and shadows, very dramatic. Strong structural shapes. Everything stands out as we can recognize the different areas in the painting as far as land over here. We've got the plants here, the flower areas in here, trees that are hanging down over it, getting hit by the light that's coming from back behind it. So really pretty. And your flowers have just a great mix of values and colored shifts all throughout the flowers. So I love that. That is very nice. So some of the things that we concentrated on were just breaking up a little bit of the lines that are in here. And like right in here, okay, so let me show you what we've got. So right here, these darks, I love the darks that are in here. And I didn't want to take those away, except that they kind of mimic a little bit so that flow, and then this kind of mimics that same. It's as if the shadow follows the shape, the movement that you have here. See? So I wanted to disrupt that a little bit. And then just this coming down and touching right there. They're just barely touching each other. When you have all this really strong dark and really bright highlight right there, that becomes then the focal point. And it seems like this area here is more of your focal point. So I was trying to bring the focus back into the flowers and still maintain, I love that brightness that's back there, but kind of subdue that just a little bit or change it in a way that it can help the viewer to then focus more in here rather than right here where the strongest contrast is. And then these right here feel like they're coming over the top of these flowers. And I feel like they should almost be that these flowers should come forward towards the viewer and the others should be back behind them. So we just put them, I just brought this flower here in front, pushed these sorry, with the flower, oh boy, that's a terrible thing. I paint flowers for 30 years and I'm drawing a blank. The stalk of the flower back behind it a little bit. And then I took these flowers here that were down a little bit lower, down here, and moved them up just a little bit up here. That way you get a much bigger, then you don't have that same feeling of the dark here following the shape or following the movement of the flowers or the outline of the tops of the flowers as much. And it helps then to also give some distance in there with those flowers going back a little bit. And then just brought in like this, subdued the color in this a little bit, brought in something off to the side here so that it doesn't feel like one strong finger coming down and touching the top of that one flower and creating that really strong tangent in that area. And that was, I think that's it. So we go from, so they're not major changes, more subtle changes. And I did add a couple of flowers in here because once I moved these flowers up, there really needed to be something here just for some visual interest in that area. So it wasn't a big hole between, like a big hole right here in between these flowers and these flowers up here. And that's it. So beautiful, really nicely done. Thank you very much, Joan. Okay. Then we get to Janet. All right. Janet. This is a fun, it's got that fantasy feeling with lots of variety all through it. So you've really covered all the elements of making it a really nice tropical scene here. And I love the color harmony contrast that you have throughout here. You've got like up in the sky, the lavenders, against the golds. You've got the greens against the reds and the rocks, like in here, these areas, just a lot of really nice color changes throughout there and color harmonies. Okay. And so the things that we focused on in here, because I love it's always fun to have light filtering down through here. I have a painting like that. It's one of my favorite paintings where I call it, sun showers or something like that, where you just see the light coming down through the leaves and illuminating a path and some other things. So it can be a lot of fun to have that kind of, those little rays of light coming down through. What stood out though is the hardness of the edges of the beams, and especially this one right in the middle that basically cuts the painting in half, almost exactly. And then it comes down and touches the water here, so we get all this reflection. Well, that becomes then an area that we cannot dismiss. We can't get past that to see all the other fun, beautiful stuff that you have back here in the waterfall. It's so strong, it's so bright and hard-edged and strong that it demands all the attention. So we subdued that a bit. And then this right here, I was really confused on what was happening with the water. So the water comes down and you got this really big waterfall. You've got some water right here that looks like it's starting to come over the edge, but it doesn't really go anywhere. There's no water coming off of it right there. This really big, powerful waterfall. It hits this rock right here that's jutting out, and then it kind of somehow gets taken to just this area right here, mostly, with just a couple of little trickles in other places. So that was what we focused on. We took out the water that was coming over the edge right up here, and so that we are now just focused into this area of the waterfall. I softened the edges of the light rays. You notice how the light rays, they still stand out strongly, but they don't, but because of the soft edges on here, because the edge is softer, it allows us then to travel back to the stuff that's back behind it more. I took this one that was in the middle, softened it a lot, especially as we come down into this area, and then really softened it out when we got to here. So you hardly see it at all as it comes into this area. That way it allows the viewer to move back into all this pretty water that's in here and up the waterfall and into all of this that's up in this area without dividing the painting into such strong halves. And then of course, we took out this rock. So now the waterfall is the main center of interest. We still have this strong one over here of water that you have, but we also brought a lot of that water down into the other areas of the waterfall. So you still have some of that moss that you have in here. I know that was, it's pretty moss that you have on those rocks, so I didn't want to lose all of that. But we also wanted a lot of that water to have more of a gateway than just this one spot right over here. And if that makes sense. So hopefully that right there, those are the main things that stood out. This does come down into a strong shape right here. And it can be nice to break up that shape, but you do have some fun things like these plants, the rocks that are a little bit different from one another that help to break up that shape some. So I didn't worry about that nearly so much as this area wreck here, because this really is the center of interest. This is what we want all of this to lead us to, back that way. So, and that's it. Let's see, make sure. Yep. So great job, Janet. It's a pretty painting. A lot of fun stuff going on in here. And really nice. I love these, the yellows and greens in the water and how they go back into the blues that are back here. All these yellow greens go back into the blues. Very pretty, nicely done. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so now we have Hoda. And Hoda, this one just, this one stumped me for a while because I looked at this and I love the stained glass feeling that you have in this part of the painting right here. I just thought, wow, it's just such a fascinating study of shapes and textures and contrasts. So it just makes me think of stained glass, and I like that. I think that's really pretty, and I love how the design of it. Just this right here, you've got this shape right there, and it's different from this shape up here. Oops. So I think that's just a lot of fun. This right here has really beautiful textural changes and color shifts in it, but it seems very different from this over here. The two, I didn't know how to put those together. Someone else might see it differently, and I know you did as an artist. That's why you painted it. But as a viewer, I didn't know how to reconcile the two together. So I didn't want to try to change this hill so that it matched this, because they're very, very different from one another. So I did one simple change. And I hope that this is possible. I did just that. Just cropped it down. I left some of this in here so now you have three different shapes like that. You have the big, medium, and small shapes, and you still maintain that same. This right here feels like it fits in with the rest of the treatment that you have in here. And it feels like a stained glass painting, the effect of stained glass in a painting. A very, very beautiful design to it. And I didn't feel like I could really do anything else to what you have on the inside of the main design in here. I love the change from the way that you change from the darker colors here, and they get a little bit lighter yellow greens into here, and then you go into the blues up here, and they really lighten up towards the top. I love the changes, all the the color changes, the subtle shifts that you have in the color down in the bottom. And then the dark, when I think of it in terms of like a stained glass design, these dark areas combined with the rest, it's almost like a mix of Van Gogh and stained glass, so that it's just a really beautiful design. So hopefully that helps you, Hoda. I once we did that, I just thought, oh yeah, that really works. These this little bit of brown and red down in the bottom corner, it also harmonizes well with all the greens and blues that you have up in the top. So to me, the whole thing just feels harmonious now. Whereas the other two, I really didn't know how to harmonize those, how to make those meld together. And that was it. We just had the two pictures because there's nothing to circle after that. we just cut off the end. All right. So this part, I mean, both parts by themselves are beautiful. They both have a lot of texture and color and other things in it that are just very pretty. I just didn't see them together. So I love this. I think this is beautiful. I could see this in a very contemporary home easily. So, okay. Thank you very much, Hoda. Beautiful piece. Okay, Earl. The first thing Christy said was, now, I would own a piece like that. This just stood out to her as, well, she is a horse lady, but she's very critical of Western kind of scenes with cows or horses, especially horses. If horse anatomy is off, she just spots it like that. So anyone who draws horses or paints horses, make sure you're very careful with your anatomy, because horse people, they'll see it very quickly. So this one just has a really nice, it's just a beautiful translucent quality to it. The light and color in it is so rich and strong and really pretty. And I love how your mountains, your hills just go off into the distance, and they have all that variety in them. The strong reds that you have in here in your bushes and trees. Okay, so the thing that stood out is, first of all, Christy said that is just feels a little bit off. And then for me, so this is one of those things we were talking about when it comes to color temperature with light and shadow. So if we come down to your shadows down here, they're mostly brownish red warm. And that might be because they might be getting some reflection from the cows themselves. But overall, you're going to take, when it comes to the shadow, it's going to be more of this color that has been cooled down a lot because you have a warm light source. So the direct cast shadow is going to be cooler. So really, you're just taking this color right here and making a cooler version of it in a darker, cooler version of it. So that's what I did. I just added some cool to it. Took some more green, a cooler bluish green color, and put that all through. Just kind of glazed over bits of your shadow in here, especially when we come to the outside edges of the shadow. So the farther in we get into the middle of the shadow, the warmer it's going to get and the darker. But more especially as we come away from that out to the fringes of it, we're going to get cooler and cooler with the shadow until, of course, we get to where the warm of the grass that's lit up and the cool of the shadow, then they start to actually blend together. So to where it's hard to tell warm and cool right there. It's almost like a mix between them. So that's all I did right in here, was add a little bit of those greens, especially to the outside edges of the shadow. Took your tail and just shriveled it down a little, or shrunk it down a little bit, trimmed it down. There we go. Just trimmed off some of that excess hair or whatever it was that was getting in the way of it. So all this right here and right there, and add a little bit of that little bob of hair that they have down here on the bottom. You notice how I tried to do it very soft on the very outside edges of it, because the cows are a little bit of ways from us. So I didn't want that hair that's on the end to feel like a really strong, hard-edged kind of thing, because it is hair. So it's going to get softer as it gets out on the edges, and then stronger as it gets up here towards the actual body of the cow. And then with the face of the cow, this one back in the background, we can't really see anything in there. And it might be that you can see more of that in the original than we can in the photograph. But I thought just adding in, doesn't have to be strong, it doesn't have to be obvious, but just bringing in something that gives a little bit of structural clarity to that head would be a good thing. And then with this area right here, it just feels it almost feels almost like a big ball over here. Whereas like this one, you have all this breakup in here, all this variety of shape, which is really fun for the viewer when you have that kind of shape variety. When we get over here, it feels more like just a big round ball of orange. A lot of textural differences and variation within that ball, but the outside of it is, for the most part, the same in the treatment. So I didn't do a lot, but just tried to break that up a little bit, bringing in some stuff. And you, as the artist of this, can do a whole lot better job than I did with Photoshop. But just think about maybe something in here that might break that up a little bit, just to break up this. And that was it, Earl. I could not see anything else in there that I thought, yeah, this needs to be changed. The cows really read really well. The grasses, I love the bright, bold colors that you have in here. So excellent job. Thank you very much, Earl, for sharing that with us. Okay, now we are on to Diane. And we're getting down the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 left. Okay, so Diane, we have, okay, very pretty. I love, okay, let's see, the log and the water, they look natural. This right here, excellent. It has all the texture and quality of a log out in the water. Excellent job with that. The heron is well drawn. It's very recognizable. We have herons all over the place out here. We see them anytime we're out and we're going along the river. We see a heron. They're here all the time, and you've got that whole gesture and all the qualities of a heron in there. It feels like a heron. So great job. And then I like, Christy and I both like this, that you brought in some little leaves over here so that it feels like this stick isn't just coming out of nowhere. It feels like there's a continuation of things over here on the left side. So that's fun to have in there. So the things that stood out to us were this right here. Your reflection is very different in quality from the trees up here, and really strong. It's almost as if they are just vibrating with color and coming out towards the viewer, rather than feeling like they're really sinking into the water. The heron, as nicely drawn as it is, it almost feels ghost-like, as if it's so subdued that it's almost like it's a reflection in the water rather than the actual heron itself. And you have all these reflections everywhere of like these little sticks that you have. There's a reflection. The bank over here, you have some reflection. Everything has a reflection. Even this stick right here has this reflection, but the heron itself, I think there might be something here, but there's the reflection of the heron that would be here isn't. So those are some of the things that we worked on. And then this right here, this log is a parallel with the bank right there. So we did some modifications to that. You can see, let me make sure I covered, yep, those are all the things we focused on. Okay, so I just took your heron and made a reflection, very subtle, very subdued down in the water here, and then made it darker. Just made it so that the heron, and really that can be done with some washes going over the top of it. You don't have to redo the drawing at all. You just go on there with a wash just to bring out some of the darks and the highlights a little bit more so that it's stronger. And then the reflections just brought in a lot of water in here, broke up some of the mass that you had in here with bits of light, like the sky coming through, and other things filtering their way through there. Ripples in the water, light, all that sort of thing, just breaking up those a bit, and then subduing the reflection of the tree trunk itself as well. So you can see here how strong that is. It actually stands out more than the tree itself. And then taking out that log, see, I left in basically all the other little things you have in here if you want those for interest, but took out that log, and then we have a much clearer access to that shoreline as we go back into the painting. And that was it. So very pretty. I love the sky, and especially the way that you reflected the sky colors and the clouds down into the water. All that is very pretty. And the trees here, these are really nicely done. They hold back there well as pine trees. So that's it. All right. Great job, Diane. Beautiful. Okay, Debbie. But this obviously is one that we enjoy a lot because we like Colorado, where we lived in the mountains there for 12 years. So we love Colorado. All right. The log, the base. What stood out to me right away is that you did an excellent job of helping us feel like we are right there at the base of the mountains. That rather than sometimes, okay, so creating that feeling of being at the base of something without everything being right here, feeling all compacted, can be complicated and difficult. And you did an excellent job of really moving us back as if we're going to walk up. If we go hiking back into there, we're going to go walking back up a mountainside. So great job with that. And then let's see, nice tree shapes, size changes all through here. Great variety all the way through it. So you don't have these rhythmic patterns that are so easy to fall into. You did a great job of breaking things up and moving the viewer back through there and having that variety that we like to see. Okay. Let's see. And of course, the structure itself is just a lot of fun. The thing that stood out is that the structure, first of all, when we come up here to the top, right there, that is a very strong vertical that leads us right up this direction. And then what do we have again? We have another strong vertical right on the top of it. And so all that does is lead us right on up and out of the painting. So changing that up, and really the structure itself is kind of bullseyed right into the center of the painting right here. So the main thing to do was to move that over some. And I know that can be heartbreaking to hear because that's a lot of work. And you have so much going on in this, in your barn here, that I would be inclined, instead of trying to change this painting, to do another one on another panel and take this as your study and then do one from this. And then with your trees right here, the base of these, you notice back here on some of these trees, you got this nice transition from shadow to light as we go up into the tree. But in these, you have this really strong edge of light. And then on some of them, you have some dark. But the two don't really fit together very well. So I just tried to integrate those a little bit. So I moved over your structure here, and that might help you then when you create another one to move that over some. And you notice how now we have this tree off to the side. I added in some foliage here on this side of it to give it a little bit more of that aspen structure. And then just brought in using some of the colors that you have within the painting, brought in some shadow, some not like strong, very bright light, strong shadow kind of contrast, but more of a subdued middle value shadow into all the bases of these trees so that there's a much nicer transition between the shadow part and the middle shadow part, middle value shadow part, and the darker value shadow part down here. And did that all the way through, even on this side over here. And then, of course, it was a lot of work to once I moved this over, to get all of this in here to actually look right. And then let's see, what else? Let me look at the thing here. So, oh yeah, adding in some trunks of those trees. So right here, just like an aspen trunk. If you see aspen trees, they will have very definite trunks that come out in places, and they don't have to be strong like these bright beacons of light or something out there. You can break them up and make them more subdued, but just having some of that in there really gives some structural clarity to the trees, and gives more interest in there as well. So if we go from the original to what we have in here, you can see the difference in transitions between the different areas in there. And then you also had this line up here, if you notice, that is really, really dark. For something that's farther away from us, the darks you'll want to keep down here in the actual structure that's near us, because it's the closest object to us. So the light and dark is generally going to be stronger than as we move away from the viewer. Now, that isn't always the way it works, especially when we're out on location. Sometimes we will see something farther away that is, and especially when we're in atmosphere like Colorado, where there is no atmosphere. It's just this clear sky. There's nothing to really disrupt values as we go into the distance. So sometimes that can get really tricky when we're out on location somewhere like that in the West, where the air is so clear. But for the most part, as an artist, this right here, when you have a strong light with the snow and the strong dark with that cut in the mountainside, that becomes then something that we get focused on and fixated. And because it's so unique out here by itself, once we see it, we just keep going back to it and back to it. And I don't want to keep going back to that, because you have so much that's so pretty in these other areas. That's what I want to focus on. I want to see what's in your structure here. I want to see what's in the trees back here, not this back here. So I just subdued that. Just you still have a cut as if maybe there's a road back there that's going up the side of the mountain, but it no longer takes us and fixates us or glues us to that spot. All right. And that's it. So it's a beautiful painting with some of those little changes. I think those would help a lot in the clarity of the piece. And of course, with the actual asymmetrical positioning of your structure. Okay. Great job, Debbie. Thank you very much for sending us that painting. Okay, Christine. And for those of you who, Christine is comments a lot, and in our Master Oil Painting group on Facebook. And she told us here recently that she did this painting. She named it after her dog that passed away earlier this year. So sorry about that, Christine. I know when you have a friend like that, it's hard to lose them. And he was quite old, I hear. So, okay. Okay, Christine, that's a very emotive piece. That sky is phenomenal. I didn't touch that at all because I wouldn't want to mess up anything there. It's just so dramatic. And you maintained that same sense of color and drama throughout the whole painting. So I like it. It's really powerful as a painting. And then I love the light on the water out here as it comes back in here. So great job. Very nice. All right. So some of the things that stood out, I wasn't sure, and Christy wasn't sure, what these pipes are. This almost looks like a grocery cart that was tipped over out there. Same thing out here. And then this right here, this area of dark, it feels almost like a hole there rather than a nice path that we can walk on and get up on this bridge and cross over to the other side with. So I worked on some of that a little bit. So just brought in a little bit of still in shadow. Oops, sorry. Still in shadow. You can see that we took the poles, the whatever those are, all those what did I just call them just a minute ago? Can't remember now. Anyway, we took all of that out, made it more like rocks and grass in there instead, and softened down some of the shadows that are here. It still, I think, maintains that same really strong light and dark drama that you have in the painting, but just brought in some little subtle color spots in here to help soften that strong dark that you have right there. So it's not so much like a hole, but more like the grass is really has a strong sense of light and dark to it. And then down in here, this allows me, in this area right here, allows me to, whoa.
Oh, sorry. Christine just said that those are lobster traps and rocks that are actually blue.
Oh, okay, lobster traps. All right. I like the idea of lobster traps, but I think that they distract from it's as if there's something that could tell a story that's in there, but to me, the overall story is that sky that you have back there, the drama in the sky and the way that it affects the landscape. So it might be a good thing just to think about that. Now, somebody that's in your region of the country might recognize those right away as lobster traps because it's something that people see all the time around there. But as far as a typical viewer coming to it and seeing the painting, this right here is the beautiful rocks, beautiful grass in here, and then it just seems to nicely, seamlessly transition up into this area and into these areas here, and they all lead us so that we can go under this bridge and go back into this and see all of the beauty back here as well. So, but then if you like the lobster traps, then keep them in there, because somebody from your area will probably know what they are and think, oh yeah, I like seeing that they're the lobster traps there. And sometimes those are just great for a local iconic identifier, so that people can, the typical viewer in your area can identify really well with the painting. So those are things to think about that way. Okay, let's see. And that was it. I did soften a little bit. See this area right here, here, and right here where your water comes in. You had this really right here, you softened it so nicely. It's not as bright as what you've got back in this area. So I did that to these areas as well, because where they come towards the bridge, that's the original. This little bright area becomes kind of like a spotlight in between in a small space like that. So I just took this gray that you had and grayed it down a little bit, just because of that, just so that it doesn't become like a spotlight right there, but it becomes an area that we can still tell that it's the water that's moving back through, but it pushes it back a little bit and helps the bridge to come forward. And in this spot right here, it was just mainly to clarify the bridge and push that water down so that it lowers that water and raises the bridge up. So those are just the very small things. Very pretty, nicely done painting, Christine. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we have Carol. Okay, Carol, right off, it has that Americana feel to it that is so much fun. Charles Wysocki and all that. There are some, that's a big market, Americana, because it's really interesting. You manage to take all of these shapes of color and put them all throughout here and make it fun to look at. They don't feel busy. They don't feel, you have a nice variety of sizes and shapes, and it's just so much fun to look at. So, and I love the depth that you have, the distance, how you've got that atmosphere in the background back here with the the hills and the trees as they go back into the atmosphere. You did a great job with that. Okay, so some of the things that stood out, and even more so when we were looking at it in Photoshop than here, is these reflections are a lot of fun, but they do stand out pretty strong. So I experimented just to see if it might help to push that into the water more by subduing some of those reflections a bit. And then some of the shapes were moved over or whatever. So I kind of moved some of them back more where they would more naturally be. So like these right here, this and this, I think, let's see, move those over some. Yeah, just a little bit. So this one, not much. And then let's see, which other one? Same thing with when you have some of them, the distance with them. Like this tree is up here very tall above all of these, but it kind of, you had the structure of it right here. So I kind of played with that a little bit, moving it up some. This one, you know, when we're talking about reflections, the reflection is actually a lot bigger than the tree itself. That sort of thing, just little tiny tweaks. And then you had these two like that are almost identical, and then this one, so they kind of become almost a pattern right there, where everywhere else in the painting you really disrupt that kind of a pattern feeling in it. So just change that up a bit. Took out one, especially since it was right on top of your pine tree. They kind of compete with each other right there at the top. So moving it to one over here that's not quite on top of anything else, and then moving the top of your pine tree up a little bit right there, not so that it's the same as the height as this one, but enough that it kind of breaks up that line of the ridge, is all that I was focusing on there. And then kept this one strong because I think that's a lot of fun right there. And it helps with that top of the ridge to have that variety that's up there, that disruption of all the shapes that you have. And then brought in a little bit more light into some of the green pine trees that you have here, because they, and not very much, but just enough, just some to take them so that they feel like they come out away from, especially over here in this case, it feels almost like it's really melting into the ridge back here, that hill, and not coming towards the viewer much. And all the other trees in here, you've really done a great job of that light and of really developing up the structure of the tree so that it comes forward from the shadows in the ridge back behind. But the other felt like it really melted into that ridge more. And then I brought this part of this tree right here back behind this a little bit so that you have some of that overlap, one on top of the other, rather than in here in the original, it's like a strong dark outline around the outside of that pine tree. So to disrupt that strong dark outline, we just brought some of that down into it a little bit more. Right there. Just to break that up some. And that, oh yeah, okay. So then the other part would be this area right up here. It creates a very strong line right there and a very strong line right there. So it's almost like a bird beak coming out with those. So we broke that up. See, just like that, coming up with some foliage on top, like that. Some foliage coming out down below, sticking out. Just things to break it up a bit. Same thing with up above as well. Just little bits. And then, of course, bringing in you've done such a great job with all the beautiful variation of light and dark and different colors. So we did the same thing with that, just breaking it up a little bit with lighter and darker edges, especially on the edges of it. Just so that the edges aren't a strong, hard edge to it, but that you have separation, a division where it allows the edges to go off into the other parts of the painting more subtly. Because you've really done a great job with that in all the other areas of your painting until we got up here close onto it. And that was it. So with the reflections that I put in here, bringing in some of that other color that's in there, I just did the same thing that you had in here with these water, the ripples in the water, and brought across some of that. So very pretty. You did an excellent job with that piece. All right. Thank you very much, Carol. That is a fun painting. Okay. Now, Azita. Wait, is that it? Yes, this is the last painting. Oh, boy. I suddenly realized, wait, that's the last one. Okay. Azita. Beautiful. We love these flowers. They're so fun, so pretty. And you've got a great variety of the way that they're facing. Some are facing away from the viewer. Some are facing towards them. Different angles, different shapes, different sizes, color variation through there. So an excellent variety of colors and shapes and textures and everything else in here. I love the textures of brushstroke where you have that striated coloring in it. All of that is just really pretty. And then, of course, all of this right here, this leaf, wow, that just is so nicely done. You have this nice subtle little shadow right there. The leaf, it has an excellent form to it. Everything about that just works. It is just masterfully done. And then I love this. What is that called? Doily, or I don't know what that's called. Sorry. Linen. I know there's a word on the tip of my brain that I just can't bring forward. Lace. There you go. That. Anyway, very pretty. I love that. Okay, so the things that stood out were so right here on the lace, all of this yellow, I thought at first, when I first saw it and didn't pay a lot of attention, I thought of it as just petals from just like what you have over here. A lot of petals that have fallen down into this area. But then as I looked at it, I don't really see the same kind of petal structure that you have out here with these. And it's a lot of it, and none of them are coming off of that linen. So I wasn't sure why that was there. When the rest of this, I can see some of this, there's some kind of a pattern that might be woven into or sewn into the overall cloth, but you don't have nearly as much of it, especially on the edges out here, as what you have right here. Now you do have some kind of a pattern, which is very nice. I love that because it breaks up that cloth in a way that is nice and subtle, but adds interest there for the viewer. And you continue that into the spots in here as it goes along out. I thought, well, maybe it was something to do with that kind of a decoration that's in it, but I didn't know. And so to me, that kind of ambiguity, it didn't fit the feeling of that cloth. So I changed that up. You have this nice light that's coming down, illuminating the leaf out here, illuminating the side of the vase and the flowers. So I brought some of that light into your cloth as well. And then that really then helps to create a separation between the light area and the shadow area here and the shadow area that you have over here. I brought some of that same light back into this area back there. And it also gives a really nice separation between the leaves that you have here in the vase, the leaves that you have out here on the wood, and what you have in here. I don't know exactly what that is, but it doesn't bother me. It doesn't take away. It doesn't distract. This part right here I felt was distractive because it didn't feel congruous with the rest of the cloth. And then this right here as well, this felt like it suddenly, all of these have such nice, strong structure to them. And when I say strong, it doesn't have to be, we want to have a variety of hard and soft edges. But with some of that, with the one that you have here, it's not that you had some areas of soft edges, is that the whole leaf suddenly became soft and it just kind of like melted into the background. And I thought, well, I don't know what happened there with that leaf. And sometimes that just comes with wanting to have it push off into the distance, and we get timid with not knowing exactly how to do that. So we changed that up a bit. And let me make sure I cover all the areas so you can see. Okay, so one was the back of the flowers here. You can see that as we go back again. And then right here, there was a strong line, just brought in very subtly some leaf texture right in there, leaf color. And then you can see that we solidified that leaf right there. So with this now, it's still subtle. It still goes back into the background. And you could even, if you want, another thought is to take some of the blue that you have here and kind of a lighter value color, like highlight area like you have there. Now, I was going to say you could maybe blue it down a little bit to push it back, but that is something to be careful with as well, because it actually becomes, the blue is a harmony with the reddish orange that you have in the wall back here, and it will actually kind of stand out more. It's going to be such a cool color that you'd want to experiment with it to make sure that it actually worked, because sometimes a blue, even a cool color, even though they're supposed to generally recede and warm colors are supposed to advance, if the cool color isn't in the right harmony, isn't done correctly, it'll pop forward just very fast. So be careful with doing that. Otherwise, just making it small, making soft edges on the outside of it, not necessarily all the way through it, also helps to push that back, because you have a much stronger edge on here than what we have on the edges back in here. And that helps then to push that smaller leaf back in the distance. We brought in these right here on both of the flowers here, because I love this. I love that we're seeing this flower from the side and that flower. But it was a very hard-edged transition. And daisies, which are Christy's favorite flower, they have some little tiny leaves. They're not necessarily big. And as artists, we can actually play with that a bit if we want to, just to make our paintings. I do that all the time with my flowers. I don't always necessarily pay too close of attention to the realistic anatomy of the particular flower that I'm working with. If a leaf, if I feel like it needs a little bit more green somewhere, or more of a petal somewhere, I might just add that in there just for the sake of the painting, and disregard entirely the actual anatomy of a flower. But in this case, daisies do have some little tiny leaves that go around the outside of it. So that works out really well to break up that more hard edge that you have between the green of the stalk and the petals of the flower. And I think those are the changes. That was it. Oh yeah, and then that little spot we talked about right here. See how it's kind of a hard line right back up in there? Well, that can become a point of distraction for the viewer. So we just soften that by bringing some of the same color that you have there in a darker, so it's in the shadows, and just brought it down a little bit right there, just to break that up some. All right, and that is it. Very nicely done. This flower right here goes off in the distance well. You have such a variety in here. This right here, this edge of this wood shelf, masterful. That is excellent, because it has that feeling of kind of a worn, used edge of a wood shelf that might have started out very crisp and sharp when it was first sawn, but now that it's been used over and over, it's gotten worn down and changed. You captured that brilliantly there. So beautiful job, Azita. Excellent. Okay, and I think that is it.
All right.
Here, slideshow.
while you're transferring your screen.
Yes.
Are you hearing that echo?
No,
Is
I
that
think
just
we're
me?
good.
Okay, then I'll just keep talking.
No, I can hear it. So it's echoing because your voice is going through Dad's speakers. So when Mom talks, just mute your side, Dad, and we'll be good.
I will do that right now.
Okay, well, I will just say the two things then. One, you might want to revisit Earl's paintings. I think it was Don Marie or Dominique. I can't remember which one, but she noticed that he was missing some back legs on the left cow. I told her that's what we call lean beef. And then the other thing was Joan wants to know, she says that so many of us seem to have issues with lines in our paintings. Any advice on seeing those as we check it upon finishing? Turn your mic back on, sweetheart.
What's that? Okay, great questions. Great observations too. So let me go back to that on the slideshow. Okay, we'll go back to Earl's. I wish there was a faster way for me to do this, but I don't think there is. Whoa, and I'll have to be careful of that. I'll just keep going. Okay, so it's missing. Oh, okay, so, oh, I see. Yeah, like, all right, that's just great. I'm glad there are people that are observant like that. And that is the thing with all of this is when you have somebody critiquing, we don't always see things. So I think right here is what she's talking about, right? Now these right here could be the legs just right next to each other, just the same way we have right here. So that is doable. But that was a very good observation. I think it was Dominique, you said, that noticed that. Yeah, Earl, you might want to add a leg back there. Unless, of course, that cow is just really talented. Okay, great job. Thank you. I think Earl's going to appreciate that. It's always nice because I know a lot of our community members they sell their work in galleries. So I have done that where I've gotten a painting out to a gallery, and I mean, one, I didn't have my signature on it. I've done that a few times, but one of them that I didn't have my signature on, they actually sold it to somebody. This is in the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. They sold the painting, and when the people got it back to Texas, they realized that the signature was missing. So they had to ship it back to me to put the signature on and then ship it back to them. What a terrible thing. So it's always nice when we can see those things before we get it into the gallery. All right, excellent job. Thank you. When it comes to the lines, I'm going to go stop this and go back to the screen here. Let's see. All right. When it comes to lines on a painting, it was Joan that asked that question. There's no easy way with that. Okay, so what I have to do with my work all the time, and I haven't read most of the professional artists that I've talked to or read or that I know personally, and I know a lot of artists, they have a mirror in their studio. Howard Turpning, he's one of the greatest artists of our time. He's one of the top illustrators in his day. Now he's the top cowboy artist, cowboy Indian artist that we have. His works can fetch upwards of I think one of them sold for somewhere around $4 million, something like that, which is phenomenal for a representational art in today's market. But and for a living artist, he's in his late 80s now, maybe early 90s. I don't know. It's been a little while. Anyway, he has a mirror in his studio. He looks in the mirror. I think a mirror is just one of those critical tools that we have to have. We've got to have something that can disrupt. So when we're looking at our own paintings, when we're going along, our brain is amazing. It really is. We can look at something and fill in the things that aren't working so that they work. And so like I'll be going along, I'll be painting, and I might have a thought come to my mind. Oh, that doesn't quite, there's something wrong with that. So then I'll go on and I'll paint whatever I'm painting on, and forget all about this spot over here. But my brain, the reason I forget about it is because in my mind, I've fixed it. It no longer has that problem. I'm seeing it differently than I saw it before because my brain wanted to resolve the problem area before I had a chance to resolve it. So we actually see things differently. Our imagination fills in the gaps. It fixes certain spots in there so that they don't actually stand out to us. But when somebody like Christy comes in and sees my paintings, right off, it'll stand out to her. And she's very cognizant of, because I've, part of it is training. I've helped her to see. So when we go to galleries or museums or whatever else together, I'll point out some of those things in other artists' work. And it's not a slur against that artist. Every one of us do it. Every one of us have problems with lines, with repetition, with putting something right in the middle of a painting. I mean, this long painting professionally, and I still do that. I'll end up with something significant right in the middle of the painting, and it shouldn't be like that. And if for a good design, it does not work well. So we all do these things. And so the best way is, I have between my easel and the back of my area here about 20 feet that I can go and get back from it so I can get a different perspective on it. Sometimes it's important to take the painting and put it away somewhere where we don't see it for like a week, 2 weeks maybe. And then we can come back, put it up on our easel, step back from it before we really look at it, and then take it all in at once and see what stands out to us. The things that stand out immediately are those things that are going to stand out generally to the viewer when they see it right off as well. And then start to take in some of the other things. If there's something that stands out right away, like a line, then we know to address that. So the things that I use primarily are my mirror. I look in my mirror all the time. And then, and in fact, in the cypress painting, I had, in the monthly videos, the cypress was one here recently that I did. And I actually had something happen in the painting where I could see it when I'd look back in the mirror. And then when I look back at my painting, I couldn't see it. And in fact, I've never had that happen before. Usually if I look back in my mirror, it tells me, oh, okay, so there it is. And then when I look back, I can now see it in my original. But in this case, I did that several times, like a tennis match, and I couldn't see it in the original. I don't know if it was the way the light was hitting on it or what, but I could not see that when I'd look at it just in the original. But I knew it was there, so I changed it based on what I saw in the mirror. That's it. So hopefully that answers your question. There is not an easy solution to that. That's why it's nice to have all these things. I have Christy to help me. I have a mirror to help me. I step back in my studio a ways. For somebody who has a small studio, you might want to take it into like a family room or outside somewhere where you can set it down and then step back away from it. You know, anything that will change the environment so that you get a different view of it than you had before. Anything to disrupt your perspective will help you to see those lines and any other repetition or symmetry or anything that might weaken the design in the painting. Okay, were there any other questions, Christy?
Just Don recommended in the comments possibly turning your painting upside down to see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, that definitely, no doubt about that. That's an excellent suggestion. Anything that will disrupt our the perception that we have right now is what we're trying to get after. Yep. Okay, anything else that we had in there?
I don't see any other questions, so I think you have done a great webinar.
Before you close out, just want to let everybody know that next month's webinar, our Paint Together from Spike's scene that he gave us, is going to be January 27th. And it is updated on the upcoming members only webinar page. So I put that on the top of the chat. You can click that link, go in, and you can register, see the image, upload your image, do whatever. We're ready to go for it.
I was talking, sorry. All right, that's great. Thank you, David. Thank you, Christy, for fielding questions for me. And thank you, everybody. Those paintings were beautiful. You did an excellent job. And they were a lot of fun to critique. So just remember, whatever suggestions I gave you, they're just suggestions. There is no, this is right, this is wrong. No, that's not the way it is in the art world. We all have our opinions. We have things that appeal to us more than other things. That's what makes the art world so amazing to be a part of, because there's such a variety of ideas and experiences and approaches to everything. So we can learn from one another constantly. I love to see other artists' work. Yes.
Before you wrap it up, Randall did come up with a question here. When you tone down background colors that fade into the distance with glazes, are you using grayed down versions of the original color or the sky color?
There's a variety of ways to go about that. You can do both of what you just suggested. So the nice thing, okay, so when you go to do a glaze, especially like with using some walnut oil and a little bit of pigment in it, just make sure that your original painting is nice and dry. If it's just dry a little bit to the touch, and you do that, if you try to wipe any of that off, because the whole point to glazes is that you can do it in successive layers, so that you don't put on something and then go, oh, wow, that was way too much, and not be able to do anything with it. So the nice thing about a glaze is that you can come on and wipe it off, and you can wipe down little amounts of it. You can wipe off most of what you just put down, or you can leave a lot of what you just put down. I haven't done a lot of glazing before, but I do do that periodically when something needs it. Often I will actually just go in there with paint and change it up with just paint. But I did watch Michael Godfrey, excellent artist. When he was at the Plein Air Convention, he was doing a lot of that. He scumbles it in. So he takes his glaze, and when he wants to really lighten up a whole area and create a consistent lightening of that area, then that's when he uses a glaze. And so it's a really, or even when he wants to darken an area, let's say that he has a big field, there's some trees, and then there's a bank over here, but the bank is kind of too bright, and he wants to help really focus the area in the light over here in the field. Well, then he'll take a darker color, and the painting has to be really dry, and then he scumbles that into all of it, and it looks horrible. But then as he starts to wipe some of that glaze off, it leaves that dark in areas, and it darkens it down just enough so that it gets just the effect that he wanted. Or the same thing with lightening up an area. So you can use, to lighten an area, you can use sky color that you have. Often that will help to create that harmonious color that we have throughout a piece based on the light source that we have. So that can be very helpful with that. Or we can just take the same color that we had there, add some white to it, put it in some olive or some walnut oil, and use that as a glaze as well. It's really experimentation playing with it. So I would take some old paintings that you don't care much about, that, let's say, old failed paintings or something, and experiment with those first. And then really get a feel for glazing with it before you go on to a painting that you really care about and that you would be much more sorrowful if it didn't work out well. And then make sure you have a cloth that this is not going to leave any lint around. So like the Viva paper towels, horrible for that sort of thing because they leave so much lint now on the painting. So use like old t-shirts or sheets or something like that for glazing. All right. Anything else? I think that might be it, since Christy is.
Nope, you're good.
All right. Good deal. Well, thank you, everyone. That was a long one, wasn't it? Oh, yeah, 3.5 hours. All right. Well, all of you, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and do some painting this weekend. Take some of the things that we've talked about in the different critiques that we saw here, and implement some of those ideas. You know, really, none of this is going to help anybody unless we actually use what we learn from it. So it's painting often is the key to it. And then taking what we learn. I love to learn from other artists. I study other artists all the time, not because I want to change my style to look like theirs, but because each one of us has something that we've learned from our unique experiences that is something we might not think of, and it can be very helpful. Even little tiny things can make a big difference over time. So have fun with it all. And thank you, everyone, for sending in your paintings. I'm looking forward to the Paint Together next month. All right. All of you have a wonderful Christmas season, my favorite season of the year. And happy painting. All right. Bye.